Breaking news this morning, Nikki Haley is ending her presidential campaign this morning. We are standing by to hear from her as this effectively marks the beginning of a general election rematch.
An AI tool is posing a serious risk to political campaigns. A watchdog group finding that misleading AI-generated photos can have a big impact on voters.
217 COVID shots. That's how many vaccines one man received. What researchers learned from his very unusual case study. I'm Kate Baldwin with Sarah Seidner and John Berman. This is CNN News Central.
And the breaking news this morning is big. Nikki Haley will announce shortly that she is dropping out of the presidential campaign. She delivers a speech in Charleston, South Carolina. We are standing by to hear what she has to say. This, of course, follows Super Tuesday. On the Republican side, Donald Trump won everything except for Vermont. Nikki Haley won there. On the Democratic side, President Biden won everything but American Samoa, someone no one's ever heard of, won there by like 8 votes. This is changing the structure of this campaign going forward. This now is historic. This is the first time you've had a rematch in a presidential campaign since Dwight Eisenhower and Adlai Stevenson. This could be the first time that a former president ever serves non-consecutive terms. If Donald Trump manages somehow to win, he'd be the first president to do that since Grover Cleveland. We are now in this historic territory. And add to that this announcement coming in the next few hours from Nikki Haley that she is dropping out of the campaign, and we do not expect her to endorse anyone. So as of this morning, we are in the Nikki Haley phase of the campaign, where both Donald Trump and President Biden are trying to reach out to her voters explicitly. The Biden campaign already out with a memo that seems to give some ideas of how to do that. Let's get right to the ground in Charleston, South Carolina. Kylie Atwood is there standing by to hear from Nikki Haley. What have you learned so far this morning, Kylie?
That's right, John. Nikki Haley is expected to announce here in her hometown of Charleston, South Carolina at 10 a.m. that she is getting out of the presidential race, that she is ending her campaign. And as you said, according to sources familiar with her plans, she is not expected to endorse former President Trump. Rather, she is going to make the case that he needs to win over her voters. This is not altogether surprising. She has repeatedly said that Trump cannot win a general election if he doesn't expand the party. She has argued that the Republican Party needs to be the party of addition. And so what she is going to say is that he needs to really talk to those voters who have supported her. Obviously, she didn't have enough support to keep her campaign alive. She didn't have enough support to surpass the former president. But in a handful of states, Nikki Haley did get a significant portion of the Republican voters voting for her. And so now we're going to watch what this conversation looks like. She is bowing out of her presidential campaign, but she is making an effort to put herself into a position of power, to engage potentially with former President Trump and her voters to see what that conversation looks like. I do want to note, however, that it does not appear that she is closing the door altogether on the possibility of endorsing Trump ahead of the general elections in November. And so that is significant. That means that this is a space that we will continue to watch. And I also think it's important to note that Trump's tone when it comes to Nikki Haley's voters has not been altogether welcoming. We haven't seen him court those voters very much over the course of the last few months. And when it came to those Republican donors who had donated to Nikki Haley just in recent months, he said that those folks would be permanently barred from MAGA. So we'll have to watch and see what his tone looks like now that she is ending her campaign.
All right, Kylie Atwood in South Carolina. Keep us posted what you hear. The Trump campaign not yet reaching out to those Nikki Haley voters. You know who is? President Biden and his campaign, with a memo that came out even before the announcement that Nikki Haley was officially dropping out of the race. Let's get right to the White House. Arlette Saenz is there to report on this strategy memo from the Biden campaign, which almost seems prescient, Arlette.
Yeah, John, and Biden campaign officials I've spoken with have long believed that Super Tuesday would be the moment that this race crystallizes in the minds of voters between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And the latest proof point they got in that argument is the fact that Nikki Haley is expected to withdraw from the GOP race this morning. And one task ahead for the Biden campaign is trying to tap into those Haley voters who have been turned off by Donald Trump. Also, those donors who may not want to donate to Trump, and they believe there could be a universe of donors that could start to give to Biden as well. And senior campaign officials really spoke to that in a memo last evening as they painted the former president as a damaged and unpopular candidate. The two women leading the campaign, Jen O'Malley Dillon and Julie Chavez Rodriguez, laid out their assessment of the Super Tuesday results. And in it, they noted, quote, a significant share of moderate and Haley voters across the country are saying that Trump cannot count on their votes in a general election. And that is something that will be key for the Biden campaign heading into November, trying to peel off support from those Nikki Haley supporters, trying to win over more moderates, more suburban, especially suburban women. The campaign has long believed that reproductive rights is an issue that will work to their advantage and one that will damage the former president. The campaign also believes that they have a lot of money to work with. President Biden has a significant cash advantage at this time over the former president. That could certainly narrow as this race proceeds, as it did back in 2020. But they believe that they have a lot of runway right now, the resources, the time, the money to make the case to those undecided voters, to moderate voters. But of course, President Biden is facing challenges of his own. He has to keep together that 2020 coalition, as we've seen some narrowing of support in groups, for instance, such as black men. There's also discontent within the Democratic Party when it comes to his handling of the conflict in Gaza, and then those persistent questions about the president's age. But really, there's this 3-day span, Super Tuesday and then the State of the Union address tomorrow, that are pivotal for the Biden campaign. The president tomorrow will really have his biggest platform so far in this campaign to tout his accomplishments and offer his vision for a second term as he's trying to convince voters to re-elect him to the White House.
Oh, that sign's at the White House. Yeah, Super Tuesday, Haley Wednesday, State of the Union Thursday. And Kate, it really is interesting that at least as of now, the Haley support, that's the terrain where this campaign seems to be being fought, at least for now.
Kate has morphed into Sarah. But all things are well here at CNN. It's all good, John. You are flying blind and doing awesome out there. Thank you so much. We're going to continue this conversation. Former Trump administration official Matt Mowers is with us, and CNN political commentator S.E. Cupp. All right. So Nikki Haley did something that's historic. She is the first woman to win a presidential primary, but she only won one, and that was Vermont. And now we're expecting her to say, I'm out, I'm done. The question is, what next? And what are you hearing in Haley world? Because apparently you've got a lot of context there.
Well, I've been talking to Haley campaign throughout all of this. And I talked to them this morning because if you saw in that Wall Street Journal article where they kind of talk about what she's going to do next. Right. And I talked to the campaign. They said, yeah, they're going to encourage Donald Trump to earn her voters. And that's important. She's not encouraging her voters to, find their own way or maybe even choose Joe Biden. She wants her supporters to go with Donald Trump if he earns the vote. Now, importantly, we're talking about whether she'll endorse or not. I said, does that mean that there's a world in which Nikki Haley could endorse Donald Trump? They said, yeah. Yeah, there is. Okay. So to end any speculation that she will not endorse him, I think it's inevitable that she probably will at some point. That will be disappointing to a lot of Nikki supporters, perhaps, moderates and independents, who kind of really liked that she was taking on Donald Trump. She is the first, not just woman to win a primary, the first Republican to beat him anywhere since 2016. It's a big deal.
Those are really good points. Yep. But as you say, she wants him to earn the votes, which probably means that at 10 o'clock when she's expected to make her announcement that she's out, she won't immediately endorse him. But we will wait and see on that. I want to let you hear what Senator Lindsey Graham said to our Dana Bash just yesterday about where he sees Haley going.
I hope she can support President Trump. She can make the case of why she would vote for Trump versus Biden on policy. I think would resonate with people. I'm pretty confident. I've known her, most of my political life, that she'll be a team player, that, there'll come a time, and I hope sooner rather than later, where she realizes this is not her moment and there's a lot at stake. So I'd find it difficult to imagine that Nikki Haley would not support President Trump when it's all said and done.
Matt, what say you?
Well, I think Senator Graham's exactly right. And if you look at the fact that Ambassador Haley, up until she really got to South Carolina, was really trying hard not to alienate Trump supporters and Trump voters. She's both trying to bring in the non-Trump coalition into the Republican Party while also maintaining the, potential of future support from more of the MAGA coalition, so to speak. And so I would expect you're going to see Ambassador Haley endorse. It probably won't be right away. It's been pretty contentious and personal the last few days. I know personally she's very bothered by the comments that former President Trump made about her husband in particular and his military service. And so it's going to take some time for him to, show that he can earn her support. But you've got to remember something else.
Do you think Donald Trump, because he's been pretty clear that he says he doesn't care.
I would not expect a full-throated apology, but what I do think you're going to be able to see, and you started to see it last night, was the Donald Trump about policy. You ask Republican voters, the types who voted for Nikki Haley, these suburban voters, you go to focus groups or polling like we do, and what you often hear is, we like the policies, we don't like the personality. Last night was all about the policies. He talked about energy, he talked about crime, he talked about immigration. If he keeps it there between the buoys, he can win a lot of those voters back, and I'd imagine that that's going to include Ambassador Haley.
I want to listen to some of those voters that voted for Nikki Haley. These are voters that were in Virginia as the results were sort of coming in last night. These are exit poll voters. Let's let you hear what they have to say.
You're supporting Nikki? You do?
I think she's great. Yeah, I think she's an outstanding candidate.
If it ends up being a Trump versus Biden rematch, do you know who you'd vote for?
Yeah, I'll hold my nose and vote for Biden again.
I really like her.
I like her a lot. I think she's got a good record, and I think she's got the best chance of winning in November.
She just seems real and honest and not boom, 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 boom,
All right. The question is to you, Essie. Where do these voters go?
That is the question.
That's the question.
Listen, a lot of them, we have exit polling showing a lot of them are not going to vote for Donald Trump. A lot of Nikki's voters are not going to vote for Donald Trump. They might stay home. They might even vote for Joe Biden, as you heard. And that's a big warning sign, a big problem for Donald Trump. Losing 40% of the Republican vote in numerous states is a big deal. If Joe Biden were losing 40% to Dean Phillips or RFK Jr., they'd be freaking out. Rightfully so. Trump has to earn those voters. The question is, does he want to? Does he care? He was just bragging about purifying the Republican Party to 100% MAGA. He's been calling her bird brain. He's been insulting her voters.
Let's bring that up, because the Truth Social that he put out, this was earlier on, I think this was even before the primary started, if I'm not mistaken. But here's what he said. He calls her a bird brain, and basically says, we don't want, if you've donated to her campaign, we don't want you.
That's to voters.
To voters.
We don't want you, voters. And this purity project that has been existing in the Republican Party for the last almost 10 years now is so wild. To shrink the tent intentionally is not just mind-blowing from the point of Republicans, whose big tent was always sort of a fetish of ours. Now to shrink it and actively kick conservatives out, not just in Congress, but voters. Yeah. It's such a dumb strategy, but this is when he seems committed to it.
Matt, I'm sure you have something to say about that.
It's just important to know one thing, though.
Yeah.
So not only today does Donald Trump essentially become the Republican nominee, but he starts as the front runner for President of the United States right now. And that has less to do with his strength or his ability to reach across the aisle and bring in these moderate voters than Joe Biden's weakness right now. His political weakness, whether it's with his own base, and you saw that in Hennepin County in Minnesota last night, where Ilhan Omar is a representative. He was underperforming with his base. You saw it in some results on the Texas border, where he's underperforming with voters who are overwhelmingly concerned about the lack of border security and immigration challenges. Joe Biden has this two-headed hydra he's got to face right now from now through November in order to get himself not just to win, but potentially even be competitive. And I've seen some recent polling in some, pretty blue states that shows that Donald Trump is competitive with Joe Biden, not because Donald Trump's getting 49, 48, 50% of the vote, because Joe Biden's in the 30s in some of these states.
But the good news,
and
now
he
that
has to
Nikki
confront
Haley is
that.
out, we're going to get an unpopular president no matter what. Congrats, America.
The polls do say that this is the matchup they did not want.
Right.
But when the rubber hits the road, we will then see how people decide, because you can talk about it and you can say you're not going to do things, but when it actually comes down to fruition, we need to remember this is just a moment in time.
Yep.
2024 is coming. November is coming. We are in sort of the hinterland as we watch all of this happen. Thank you both for being here. Essie Cupp and Matt Mowers. And this is going to be Kate's turn finally. Hey.
Oh, thank you. I love that lead up. And we will bring you Nikki Haley's remarks live when she speaks from South Carolina at 10 a.m. Eastern. Also this, the House is scrambling right now to pass a $1 billion spending package. Call it a mega minibus. Doesn't that sound nice? They're doing this to avoid a partial government shutdown that could set in on Friday. Yes, we have been here again. No, you're not watching this show on Rewind. We will tell you what they're up against and what this means now for the Republican House Speaker. And jury deliberations could begin today in the trial of the Armor on the Roughs movie set. Closing arguments start this morning.
Biden, Trump, sound familiar? This morning, Donald Trump has a clear path to the Republican nomination, with Nikki Haley set to bow out of the race in just a couple of hours now. The announcement expected. CNN's Harry Enton is here. Harry, how do the polls look ahead of what everyone sees is going to be a Biden-Trump rematch?
Yeah, we're on track for perhaps one of the longest general elections in the modern primary era. And let me tell you, Sarah, the polls now look so much different than they did 4 years ago at this point. So look at these polls that came out over the weekend, right? There were 4 of them. The New York Times Siena College poll got the most press, had Trump up 4. But it was matched by a CBS News YouGov poll that also had Trump up 4. Fox News, Trump up 2. Wall Street Journal, Trump up 2. And as I mentioned when we started, the polls right now look so much different than they did in 2020, because keep in mind, Trump led in not a single. There were 0, count them, 0 general election polls nationally that Trump led in during the 2020 campaign. Here we have 4 right here. And I want to bring this to your attention because I think this is so interesting. Okay. Has Trump committed serious federal crimes? This is among likely voters. Overall, the majority say yes. Yes, he has. Yet, Trump was leading in that poll by 4 points, as you see that New York Times Siena College poll up there. Why is that? Because take a look at 2024 Trump supporters. Even among them, 18% say he committed serious federal crimes, and yet they're still voting for him. If you're Joe Biden, I just have to ask the question, what the heck are you supposed to do with polling like this?
Right. What are you supposed to do? Look, this is probably going to be decided by the swing states and the Electoral College in the end. What is going on in the all-important Electoral College?
Yeah, so let's have a fun little game here, all right? We're going to go race to 270. And if we bring it up here, take a look at where we were in the 2020 election, right? Joe Biden won with 306 electoral votes. Donald Trump got 232. But look at where our CNN race ratings are right now.
Wow.
Look, Donald Trump at 272, Joe Biden at just 225. What the heck is going on here? Well, there are a few things that are going on here. Number one, Georgia, which Joe Biden won last time around, leaning in Trump's direction. Nevada, which Trump won last time around. Biden won last time around, leading in Biden's direction, leading in Trump's direction. Arizona, a toss-up that Biden won. And here's the key nugget. Look up here in the upper Midwest, the Great Lake battleground states. Michigan, look here. Leaning in Trump's direction, despite the fact that Biden nearly won that state by 3 percentage points back in 2020. So we're just seeing a very, very different pathway in this general election. And keep in mind, even if Joe Biden wins all these yellow toss-up states, so let's say we give him Pennsylvania, let's say we give him Arizona, that gets him to 255. Let's say we give him Wisconsin, he's only up to 265. And let's see if I can do that right there. Well, I couldn't. And even there,
wow.
Joe Biden at 266 electoral votes. So something needs to change going forward. The pathway right now for Donald Trump is very clear to 270 electoral votes. It's far, far less clear for Joe Biden.
It's interesting. The polling taken, though, before Nikki Haley made her announcements, because that's expected to happen in just a couple of hours. We will see. It's a snapshot in time, and we have to mention that every single time.
It is a snapshot in time. Over the last few election cycles, the polls have stayed fairly steady over the course of the campaign, but the sample size is only really 2, right?
Right.
Let's see what happens in 2024, where things can be even crazier, obviously, with the Trump trials. We don't know what's going to happen there. Still early days yet in what is shaping up to be one of the longest general election campaigns on record.
Harry Enton in the poll of polls. Everyone gets excited about it. Woo! Especially you.
I know, I do.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Kate.
Can I just also say, I'm just now realizing, watching you in this angle, the elbow patches on your jacket?
Yeah,
That's
that's
a
part
strong
of the poll.
game. I'm very
this
sorry.
This is my poll of polls
I
jacket.
should not have done a
Hold
lesson
on,
on that. I'm sorry.
Polls
Oh, I
jacket.
like that. That's nice. I got to get
Polls
those for
matter,
me.
and so do elbow patches on jackets. All right, coming up still for us, I'm going to get back to the news. Closing arguments are set to begin this morning in the Rush shooting trial. But first, the defense wants to call final witnesses. We will take you there on this day. One man deliberately got 217 COVID-19 vaccine shots in the span of 29 months. 217. What happened is the focus of a new study. Lawmakers are once again racing against the clock to avoid a partial government shutdown at the end of the week. They have, you have, we all have unfortunately been here before. Today, the House will vote on a funding package of 6 annual spending bills mashed up into one. It's been described as a mega minibus. And Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson, he is going to need the help of Democrats to get this over the finish line and do so in time. And what does that mean for his speakership and future? CNN's Lauren Fox is looking at all of it for us from Washington. What is the reality of what's happening here, Lauren?
Well, this was really inevitable all along, Kate. When the deal was struck last summer in that debt ceiling proposal and passed in the House and Senate, it really did set out the course of this spending negotiation over the last several months. It just took them almost a year to get to this grand finale. So here's what's going to happen. The House of Representatives is going to vote today on this package of 6 spending bills. Then they're going to kick it over to the Senate. It's going to be up to lawmakers to decide how quickly they want to process it over there. They need to get agreement of all 100 senators to move expeditiously. The hope is that they might be able to get this done before the president has the State of the Union tomorrow night. If for some reason they can't get a time agreement, then you could see this kick into Friday or over the weekend. But senators are optimistic they're going to be able to nail down some kind of agreement among their members. Once this happens, you still have another 6 spending bills that have to be passed by March 22nd. That second tranche of spending bills is even more difficult to get across the finish line because it includes programs that are much more controversial. Now, for Johnson and his future, you already have members of the House Freedom Caucus saying they don't like these bills, they're not supporting these bills. But ultimately, while many of them are grumbling, you haven't heard them saying this is the end of Johnson's speakership, in part because they do believe that when McCarthy set the course last summer with that debt ceiling deal, it became very difficult for any future speaker to get off the tracks that were already set for him. Kate?
To continue with the analogy, let's see if this train remains on the tracks in the next couple of days. Lauren, it's great to see you. Thank you so much. Sarah.
All right, thank you, Kate. Today, closing arguments are expected to begin in the trial against Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, the armorer on the set of the movie Rust that left cinematographer Helena Hutchins shot dead while she was filming a scene. CNN's Josh Campbell has more on the trial. Josh, the armorer is responsible for firearm safety on the set. What's the latest you're hearing in this case?
Well, so we could be wrapping up very shortly with this trial. You know, this is a trial that has been watched from coast to coast, particularly by the entertainment industry because of the precedent that it might set. Hannah Gutierrez-Reed didn't shoot anyone. She wasn't holding the gun when it went off. Prosecutors don't even know how live rounds of ammunition made their way onto the set. But this hinges on whether the jury believes that she, in her role as the armorer, was negligent in the death of cinematographer Helena Hutchins. Now, this trial has gone on for over 9 days now. The jury hearing from over over 35 witnesses. The prosecutors have really focused on that negligence. And in one particular moment, I'll play this for you. The prosecutor got up and said, look, we went through the scene taking pictures of everything we saw, and we actually saw what appeared to be live rounds of ammunition commingled into what are called dummy rounds. This was across the movie set, and he played this video for the jurors and actually showing them some of these photos, including one photo where Hannah Gutierrez-Reed is allegedly sitting there with a live round of ammunition in the shot. Have a watch, have a look.
We were able to identify several points in time where the cartridges with a silver and a shiny brass cartridge ended up being spotted inside of the gun belts and bandoliers that the cast members were wearing on the set. There was one occasion where a live round was sitting right on Miss Gutierrez's lap, and she failed to identify it.
Now, Reed has pleaded not guilty to involuntary manslaughter. Her attorney claims that his client is being scapegoated. They are focusing their attention on the Rust movie production itself, saying that there was this culture of unsafe practices, saying that they were rushing to get this thing finished in order to cut costs. The attorney even pointing the finger at Alec Baldwin himself. Watch.
You know what the primary thing was here? It was rush, get this done so we can get the money. And that's all on production. And Mr. Baldwin, he violated some of the most basic gun safety rules you can ever learn. From a young age, we all learned you don't point a gun at somebody, ever, unless you want to shoot them.
Now, there was one particular strong moment yesterday where the defense called a witness who was with the Occupational Safety Health Administration. They conducted their own investigation of this movie set. That witness testifying that they found workplace hazards involving firearms. And although the movie put in place safety practices, this witness said that the movie production totally failed to enforce them. Of course, we'll see what the jury ends up deciding here. Closing arguments expected to begin today, and then the jury will get the case, Sarah.
There's so much there. It's really hard to understand why there were live rounds mixed in with dummy rounds. Yeah. Man, Josh Campbell, thank you so much for following this trial for us. Kate?
As we learned this morning that Nikki Haley will be leaving the race, CNN spoke to some voters in battleground Wisconsin who say that they plan on voting for her even if she's not on the ballot. We'll bring that to you. And Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, he launched his short-lived presidential run on a promise to fight so-called woke ideology. He then dropped it when that message didn't work, and now he seems to be back at it. His new plans after a federal court blocked what he calls the state's Stop Woke Act. In just over an hour, Nikki Haley is going to be making the final remarks of her 2024 campaign as she is exiting the race. President Biden and former President Trump, they showed up with big wins last night, both claiming the overwhelming majority of party delegates at stake on Super Tuesday. So CNN's Gary Tuckman, he talked to voters in battleground Wisconsin as they're still preparing to cast their vote.
I want to ask all of you, we have some Biden supporters here, some Trump supporters, some Haley supporters. If the election were today, how many of you would be voting for Donald Trump? 1, 2, 3, 4. How many of you would be voting for Joe Biden? 1, 2, 3, 4. Is anybody still ready to vote for Nikki Haley? 1, 2, 3. So that leads to my next question. Do any of you think that Nikki Haley still has a shot? But you're still going to write her in if the election were held today? Both of you feel that way, and you feel that way also? You don't. So who would you vote for?
I would vote for Trump.
You would vote for Trump. So let the people who are voting for Donald Trump raise your hand again for a second. I'll start with you because you said you're voting for Trump. Why do you think you'll vote for Donald Trump?
I would vote for him, just his strong stance in American patriotism. He's got the backbone that America needs desperately, so he has my vote.
And do you not think Joe Biden is a patriot?
Not certain.
Not certain. Okay. What about you? Why are you going to vote for Donald Trump?
I think he's the man for the country right now. I don't like him personally, but I know that he...
You don't like what personally?
Yeah, his personality. I can see past that towards like policy. So I think his policy is for economic growth. I'm concerned about border security and economic independence.
Question we've been asking in polling today, is he fit to be president if he's convicted of a felony? What do you think? Who's another one of our Trump supporters who wants to answer that question? What do you think?
I do.
And why do you? That wouldn't bother you if he was convicted of a felony being president?
It would bother me, but it would bother me more to vote for Biden.
And why is that?
I just, I think when the press is saying things about him, and what I see too, that he's incapable of speaking, that he probably has Alzheimer's.
Well, that's speculation, but yes, he does make mistakes speaking, but so does Donald Trump, right?
Right.
And that doesn't bother you, though?
It's not in the same way.
Okay, our Biden supporters, raise your hand. Why Joe Biden?
Because I'm not worried that he's not going to leave office.
What does that mean?
I think that Trump may want to stay in the office or may make changes that precludes his leaving. I'll leave it at that.
And regarding both of you who are saying that you're going to write in Nikki Haley at this point, and because she doesn't have a chance to be president, why would you do that?
Well, I think like many in this country, I feel like we have to vote between the lesser of two bad choices, I mean really bad choices. And I just feel like in my conscience, while I do think that President Trump did some good things, that I am very concerned about what a second term would mean.
And our thanks to Gary Tuckman for that. The sun is rising over the state capitol here in Denver, the state capital of Colorado. Metaphorically, the sun is rising. It is the dawn of this new phase of this presidential campaign, an historic phase where we are seeing a rematch between President Biden and Donald Trump, with Nikki Haley announcing she is going to drop out of the race. That will happen very shortly. We'll, of course, stand by to bring that to you live. In the meantime, how does the Biden campaign, how does the White House try to reach these Nikki Haley voters? He's got a big opportunity tomorrow night. It's the State of the Union address. With me now is CNN contributor and former White House Communications Director Kate Bedingfield. Kate, great to see you. So there's this big speech tomorrow night, and I do have to tell you, every voter I talked to coming out of the polls here in Colorado, they were well aware that Joe Biden was delivering the State of the Union address tomorrow night. How does he reach a Nikki Haley voter?
Well, that's great. That's a great opportunity for Joe Biden then. So, you know, tomorrow night, I think he really has a big moment to lay out the contrast. He can talk about his vision for the economic future of this country. He can talk a lot about what he's done for the middle class, but also critically how he will continue to fight for the middle class. His task tomorrow is really to lay out a vision for the next 4 years, what it looks like under Joe Biden, who would thrive, who he's fighting for, whose side he's on critically, versus what the world would look like under Donald Trump. I think to reach these Haley voters, and we saw this, you know, in the results last night. I mean, we saw suburban voters who are going to be so critical to determining the outcome of this election. They didn't come out for Donald Trump. They came out for Nikki Haley. They told exit pollers that they couldn't stomach voting for Donald Trump, even if he's the Republican nominee. So there is a path for Joe Biden through the suburbs in particular. And so he's really got to make this race about issues that we know motivate those voters. This question of who's going to protect your right to choose, on this question of democracy and freedom, and under Donald Trump or Joe Biden, under which presidency are you going to have more rights? Are you going to be able to live your life the way you want to live it? So he has an opportunity tomorrow night when people are going to be paying attention in a way that at this stage of the game, they're not really paying attention to presidential politics most nights. So it will be a big moment for him, no question.
I will tell you, the Democratic voters that I spoke to yesterday, many of them told me they were listening to what the president was going to say about Gaza. These are Democratic voters who have some concerns about U.S. support for Israel in the war against Hamas in Gaza. How do you think the president handles that, particularly with a not insignificant number of people in Minnesota and some other states voting for incommitted or none of the above in these primaries?
Well, I think he'll probably use the opportunity tomorrow night to explain what he's doing to get humanitarian assistance into Gaza, to continue to push the Israeli government, to push Hamas, to push all parties to come to a table to get to a ceasefire, to get hostages out, and to get to a point where we're moving past the most brutal phase of this conflict and into the next phase. Obviously, his administration has been doing an enormous amount of work on this. Now, the challenge with work like this is that it's often behind the scenes, sometimes necessarily so. So he has an opportunity tomorrow night to explain to voters what he's pushing for, why, and his own personal values behind it too, which I do think is an important piece of this conversation that doesn't always show up. So he'll have a chance to do that. But I think the other thing to think about is for voters who are frustrated with his policy, if you look at the choice in November, it's going to be a choice between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Donald Trump went on Fox 2 days ago and was asked what the IDF should do, and he said they should go into Gaza and finish the problem. So as the race crystallizes, as the choice becomes not just Joe Biden and, well, I'm frustrated with some elements of his policy, and in theory I'd like to see another option, the choice is going to be Joe Biden or Donald Trump. And I think for voters who are concerned about the loss of life in Gaza and what they're seeing, what they're witnessing there, Donald Trump isn't the answer to alleviate that suffering.
So, Kate, Manuel Miranda tells me you've been in the room where it happens. For a State of the Union address, you've been there as the preparation goes on. What is happening right now to get ready for the speech? Who's talking to him? How willing to criticize President Biden are the people behind the scenes?
Sure. Very willing. It is a very candid discussion. The president rehearses a lot for the State of the Union. That's one thing that sort of separates the State of the Union from a lot of other business the president does. There aren't that many moments, just given how much demand there is on the president's time all the time. There aren't that many moments where the president really has an opportunity to rehearse, to take time to go through the speech many, many times, to deliver it, to think about how he wants the key sections of the speech to land and how he wants to deliver them. So there's a lot of rehearsal that goes on in the last couple of days leading up to the State of the Union. There's a lot of discussion about what are going to be the big key takeaways? What are going to be the moments that are going to provoke a response in the room? How do things land in the room there in the well of the Congress versus for the average viewer who's watching on television? And how do you ensure that you're underscoring the things that you want the average viewer to take away from what is actually ultimately a very long speech? But yes, there is a lot of candid discussion of this. The president, I can tell you, somebody who's been there many times, the president welcomes feedback. He wants to debate these points with his advisors. He wants to hear competing viewpoints and then ultimately zero in on a speech that's going to tell the story that he wants to tell. So that's what goes on in the last couple of days leading up to the State of the Union. A lot of preparation.
Thank you for that inside look. Kate Bennyfield, great to talk to you. Appreciate it. Sarah?
All right. Thank you, John. Still ahead. This man deliberately got 217 vaccine shots for COVID-19. Why and what happened to him? That's coming up next. Also, in minutes, Georgia State Senate panel is launching its investigation into Fulton County DA Fani Willis and the misconduct allegations against her. All that's ahead.
A federal appeals court hits the brakes on the Florida governor's anti-woke agenda for his state. Well, now Ron DeSantis is preparing to make his next move after a lower court says that some of his anti-woke push violates employers' free speech. CNN's Carlos Suarez is watching this, following this from Miami. What happens now, Carlos?
Well, Kate, the Florida governor will have to decide whether he is going to appeal this decision. The 11th Circuit Court of Appeals really did not mince words, denouncing the law as committing, quote, First Amendment sin. The ruling, as you noted, upheld a lower court's decision that found that the Stop Woke Act violates the U.S. Constitution. The act, signed into law by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis in 2022, was challenged by two Florida-based employers who wanted to require diversity and inclusion training for workers. DeSantis championed the law throughout his failed run for president, and it was a key part of his war on, quote, woke ideology. The law banned teachings or mandatory workplace activities that suggest a person is privileged or oppressed based on their race, color, sex, or national origin. Now, the state of Florida argued that the legislation regulated the conduct of requiring employees to attend meetings. The court, however, they disagreed and said that the law targets speech. Court of Appeals Judge Britt Grant, who was appointed by former President Trump, issued the opinion, writing in part, quote, even if we presumed that the act served the interests of combating discrimination in some way, its breadth and scope would doom it. Banning speech on a wide variety of political topics is bad. Banning speech on a wide variety of political viewpoints is worse. The governor's office pushed back on the ruling, saying that the court, quote, held that companies have a right to indoctrinate their employees with racist and discriminatory ideologies. We are reviewing all options going forward. Monday's ruling focused on the workplace-related provision of the law. A lawsuit challenging how race is taught in classrooms is still playing out in federal courts. Kate?
Carlos Suarez, thank you so much. Sarah?
All right, a tech watchdog is warning of the serious implications that top AI generators could have on the presidential election. The tech watchdog group Center for Countering Digital Hate found, despite some guardrails, that photos can be manipulated into producing fake election-related images, despite some of those safeguards that are in place. The tech watchdog Center for Countering Digital Hate researchers entered prompts to see what photos they could create with AI. Some of the fakes included a photo of President Biden sick in a hospital bed, a photo of boxes of ballots in a dumpster, and a picture of former President Donald Trump getting arrested. CNN's Claire Duffy is joining us now. You're looking at these generations, and we have seen how AI can work. You know, young folks get on there. It's easy to create some of this, but there were guardrails in place. What is being done to try to deal with this potential impact on a presidential election?
Yeah, Sarah, I mean, that's what's really alarming about this is that all of these platforms say they technically don't allow people to create potentially misleading AI-generated images, in some cases going so far as to say they don't allow political misinformation. But as with many tech platforms, putting the policies in place is often much harder than actually enforcing them. And I think that's what you're seeing here. These researchers tested 4 top AI generators: Midjourney, Stability AI's Dream Studio, OpenAI's ChatGPT Plus, and Microsoft's Image Creator, and they tested them using these prompts related to the presidential election to see if they could get them to create potentially misleading images related to the candidates or election fraud. And what they found is that in 41% of their tests, these AI tools were creating potentially misleading photorealistic images. And I think this just really speaks to just how real these concerns are that these new AI tools could create misinformation that could cause harm and confusion ahead of not just the U.S. election in 2024, but elections around the world. Already just this week, we've seen separate reports that internet users were creating AI-generated images of black people supporting former President Donald Trump in an effort to sway voters. So very real concerns here. And what these researchers say needs to happen is that these AI companies need to get better at proactively detecting when users are trying to create these misleading images, especially when users are using these so-called jailbreak tactics that are specifically designed to get around the company's rules. Sarah.
Claire Duffy, it's a really important story as we march toward November especially. Thank you so much for your reporting there. Kate?
One man deliberately got 217 COVID vaccine shots over 29 months. That averages 1 shot every 4 days. In the process, he basically became a walking experiment of COVID shots and the impact on the human immune system. Let's bring in CNN's Meg Terrell. She's got more on this and what this one man became. This study he became the center of. What happened to him?
Well, Kate, he is okay. That's the first thing to say. The second thing to say is absolutely nobody should do this. This was, of course, not with any medical guidance that he was doing this. He was actually being investigated by the authorities in Germany, where he was when he got these 217 shots. That's how medical researchers found out about him, and they started to study him. It's a 62-year-old man. He got these 217 shots over 29 months. As you said, that averages 4 a day, but there was 1 month in January of 2022, he was actually getting 2 shots per day on most days of that month, 1 in each arm. Now, they started to look at him when he was toward the end of this, around 214 shots in, and what they found is that he did have more immune cells in terms of antibodies and T cells than a comparator group who just got 3 vaccine doses, but his immune response wasn't any better or worse necessarily than that control group. Importantly, also, he didn't report any vaccine-related side effects, which is kind of hard to believe, but that is what they say in this paper, and he never got COVID, although they say they don't know if that's because of all these vaccinations or because of his behavior or something else, guys. But this guy considered a walking experiment. Never any charges pressed against him in Germany, but he is okay. And this tells us that at least these shots appear to be safe at this quantity, if not recommended at that level, guys.
Not recommended at that level. That's for sure. It's good to see you, Meg. Thank you so much. The breaking news, it is the end of the road for Nikki Haley. Next hour, she will announce that she's dropping out of the race. A huge moment as this race effectively becomes a general election matchup today.
And what are the candidates saying? Wounded, dangerous, and unpopular. That is how President Biden is describing Donald Trump this morning, as a rematch between the two is almost certain.
Happening right now, Georgia state senators are about to hear testimony in their own investigation into Fulton County DA Fani Willis. I'm Kate Baldwin with Sarah Seidner here in New York. John Berman is in Colorado. This is CNN News Central.
This is CNN Breaking News.
And the breaking news, welcome to the first day of the rest of this presidential campaign. An historic presidential campaign, an historic rematch between a current president and a former president, with the breaking news this morning that Nikki Haley, the former governor of South Carolina, is about to officially announce she is dropping out of the presidential campaign. This following the disappointing showing on Super Tuesday. She will make that announcement shortly in Charleston, South Carolina. We've got live pictures of this event where she will make that announcement again shortly. We also have learned she will not endorse anyone, at least in this speech, and she will say Donald Trump has to earn the support of Nikki Haley voters. Nikki Haley support very quickly becoming the terrain with which this campaign will be fought over in the coming days, if not the weeks and months. It could be crucial to victory for both Donald Trump and President Biden. The Biden campaign put out a campaign memo even before the announcement from Nikki Haley that she was dropping out that seemed to specifically target those Nikki Haley voters. So we've got a lot to cover this morning as we see this unfold before our very eyes. I'm joined by Kylie Atwood, who is at the Nikki Haley event. Alina Treen is in Washington also. Kylie, first, let's go to you. What are we going to hear?
Well, Nikki Haley is going to end her presidential campaign today after running for president for more than a year. She's going to speak here at her campaign headquarters in Charleston, South Carolina, to folks on her staff, to people that she is close with here in her home state of South Carolina, to explain to them that she has reached the end of her campaign now. She is not going to come out and endorse former President Trump immediately. Sources familiar with her plans tell me that she's going to make the case that he needs to earn the support of her voters. That's not altogether surprising. She has been making the case over the course of the last few months that Trump cannot win a general election unless he expands the party. And while she did not get enough support to keep her campaign alive, she did beat former President Trump in 2 states, and she had a significant portion of the electorate that voted for her in a number of states. So she believes that her voters want a different pathway forward, and former President Trump is going to have to speak with them, make the case to them that they should be supporting him. Now, one thing that I do want to point out is that she initially said that she would endorse whomever became the eventual nominee of the Republican Party. That was last summer, but recently she has been giving a number of reasons for why she no longer felt bound to that pledge. And I also think it's important to note that former President Trump's team knows that they are going to need Nikki Haley supporters, but we haven't seen them actively reach out to those supporters. And it's worth noting that just last month, Donald Trump said that those who are donating to Nikki Haley's campaign are permanently barred from MAGA. Nikki Haley told some reporters last week that those comments really stuck out to her. That was really concerning for her to hear the former president say that. Now we'll have to watch and see what the dialogue between the two of them looks like, as she is attempting to put herself in a position of power, even though she is ending her presidential campaign. John?
All right, Kylie Atwood in Charleston, stand by. That's the opposite of outreach to Nikki Haley and Nikki Haley supporters. So let's go to Alina Treen now. Any sign over the last few minutes, few hours since the news came out that Nikki Haley was suspending her campaign, that Donald Trump, the Trump campaign, will change the tenor of their approach to that Haley support?
Well, there's a couple things I want to note here, John. One is that this was their goal
with Super Tuesday. Donald Trump wanted to have a decisive enough win across the board in all of the Super Tuesday states to ultimately force her out of the race. And so they're very happy seeing that that is exactly what's going to be playing out in the next hour or so. But look, to get to your question and to address some of what Kylie brought up is Donald Trump's campaign understands that they need to do work with moderate voters, with independent voters, with the people who went for Nikki Haley. And they saw yesterday on Super Tuesday that Nikki Haley did very well with suburban voters, a key voting group that his campaign knows they need to pursue and to try to win over. Now, I know that they had been eager to have him become the presumptive Republican nominee as soon as possible so that they could start really working on those plans and setting up their general election campaign in earnest. That means really fanning out their ground game strategies in a number of the battleground states like Wisconsin, Georgia, Arizona, Michigan, all places where they recognize they have work to do. Now, the other thing I want to note that Kylie brought up is about the endorsement and that she's not going to be endorsing immediately. That is going to frustrate Donald Trump. We know that he has long been very annoyed and angered by Nikki Haley refusing to drop out. And even now, he wants to see people like Nikki Haley and others, all of the Republican holdouts who have been looking for an alternative, to rally around him. And so I think that will not go a long way with the Trump campaign. And I don't think it'll do much to really have them potentially look to embrace her at all. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, John.
Well, we will all be watching carefully to see what Nikki Haley says, not just what she says, though, also how she says it. That will be very interesting and perhaps something that Donald Trump will want to see as well. All right, let's go back to Sarah. Sarah?
All right, thank you, John. Joining us now to continue the conversation, CNN senior political commentators David Axelrod and Scott Jennings. All right, Haley going to announce she's out. We're expecting that in less than an hour now. And the big question is, what happens? What does she say? And does she actually endorse Donald Trump, or does she take a moment? We're hearing from S.E. Cupp, by the way, just last hour. She said she is learning from her campaign that Haley plans to make Trump work for her voters. What does that mean?
I mean, she's going to piss Trump off. I think that's one thing it's going to mean. But listen, I'm not surprised. You know, I've actually lived through some of these where a campaign ends that's been pretty competitive or in tone at least, and it's not natural for candidates to immediately reconcile. But you know, look. My observation of her is that she's been a very skillful, a very determined, a very relentless candidate, but she's also been pretty cautious about not crossing certain lines. And that says to me she wants to preserve her optionality in the future in the Republican Party. And so at some point it wouldn't shock me if she endorsed Trump, but it would be a little startling if she did it today.
I think she's misunderstanding who the people are that voted for her. If you look at the weekend polling that came out, if you look at some of the exit polling we did on the Super Tuesday states, these people were not really Trump voters to begin with in 2020. A lot of them didn't vote Republican ever. I mean, she attracted some Democrats. She attracted some independents who behave like Democrats. She became an avatar for the people who dislike Trump the most. So the idea that Donald Trump is going to go out on some reconciliation tour and convince all the never-Trumpers that were in her campaign, that's not going to happen. And so there
may be though some impetus for him to try and reconcile because of her donors. Because one thing we know is that he is desperate for money and he wants some of those people on board. So that may curb his instinct, which is never to be reconciled, but to be on the attack. But this point you make about who these people were yesterday, yes, a lot of people who voted for her yesterday and through this period have been Democrats who were free because there was no Democratic contest, independents who were leaning in Biden's direction, wanted to engage in mischief. But there were a body of Republicans there who more college-educated Republicans, suburban Republicans, and Trump does need to be concerned about that because that's a place where Biden can do some business.
You talked about donors, and I want to put up this Truth Social that Donald Trump did many moons ago, but as the campaign was going, and he talks about those who donated to Haley's campaign. He calls her a bird brain, if we could bring that up, and there it is.
He meant that in the nicest way.
In the nicest way possible. He calls her a bird brain, and then he goes on to basically publicly attack donations, people donating. People donating to Haley campaign isn't just large-scale donors. That's attacking the very voters, potentially, that he may need in the general. What do you do about that?
Well, I think they assumed that the people who were donating to her after it was long past the point of the possibility that she could win are never going to be with him anyway, so they didn't feel like they had anything to lose. To Axe's point about needing to reconcile with some of these college-educated moderates, some of the donor class, this is part of the algebra of this campaign. If you're Donald Trump and you see this outflow of college-educated voters, can you replace them with an inflow of this working class, multiracial, working class, non-college educated coalition? You're starting to see it show up in the polling. Getting almost a quarter of African Americans in the New York Times poll, winning Hispanics. So really, you're seeing this huge amount of shifting sand. And for Biden, can you convert these college-educated voters who have probably behaved as Republicans for some chunk of their life more than you did in 2020? You're going to see significant flow. The question is one enough to replace the other?
Yeah, I mean, David, what would you tell Joe Biden? He's got a speech, a State of the Union speech on Thursday. What does he need to say? Or is there something he can say to try and bring in not only some of Haley's voters, but some of the Democrats who have gone out and decided, I'm going to vote uncommitted?
Yeah, look, I think more than anything, what he needs is an identifiable and motivational narrative for the campaign. Campaigns, we always talk about issues, and issues are very, very important, but narratives are important as well. What is the story he's telling about what his presidency is about, why he's worked on the issues he's worked, who he's working for, and how he sees the future, and set up a contrast with Trump, who's a guy who's consumed by his past. That's the story that he needs to tell tomorrow night, and I think it has to be heavy on the things that people are concerned about. If you're privileged, you sit around and you talk about democracy. I do. Right. But if you're sitting around the kitchen table and you're worried about your grocery bills, you're probably not talking about that. So he needs to bear down on the things that the American people are concerned about and talk about how the things he's doing are meant to help their lives and improve their lives.
David Axelrod, Scott Jennings, thank you. Always a good conversation. Thank you. Appreciate it. Kate?
We have new details on the Biden campaign's plan and strategy to take on Donald Trump now, as this rematch between the two is all but certain at this point. And right now, Georgia state senators are hearing testimony as they launch their own investigation into Fulton County DA Fani Willis. You're looking at live pictures there. And a bipartisan group of lawmakers is speaking out this morning as they push forward on a national security package, a bipartisan bill that includes border security measures and much-needed aid to Ukraine and Israel. We'll be back. So Congress has been effectively frozen on any and all efforts to pass border security measures and to respond to the crisis at the southern border, and also frozen on efforts to send any further and much-needed aid to Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. This morning, a bipartisan group of House lawmakers are pushing forward on a $66 billion national security package that they say is the answer to all of this. This bipartisan group spoke out just a few minutes ago. Listen.
It's no secret that we're in a period of gridlock, generally speaking, with divided chambers, with tight margins in both chambers. And that's a problem with any issue, but it's especially a problem when you have time-sensitive existential matters.
And joining me now are two co-sponsors of this new House bill, Democratic Congresswoman Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez from Washington State and Republican Congresswoman Lori Chavez DeRemer from Oregon. Thank you both for joining me this morning. Congresswoman Gluesenkamp-Perez, why is this bill the right solution when House Republican efforts, they weren't, like Republican-only efforts weren't, and by the bipartisan Senate deal, it also wasn't?
Well, in a system where you require both parties, this is the only piece of legislation that has support from Republican leaders like Fitzpatrick and Chavez DeRemer. And if you want to build a durable deal, that's what it takes, and that's what we're committed to.
Congresswoman Chavez DeRemer, do you think allowing a House vote on this bill, if it came down to it, because this is how politically sensitive some of these issues have become in an election year, do you think allowing a House vote on this bill is worth Speaker Johnson putting his speakership at risk?
Absolutely. I think Speaker Johnson has opened the door to this. We've spoken to the Speaker. He recognizes how important these issues are. I think it's a simple message. We want to make sure that we're securing our border. Why should I care? Why would Marie care? Why would our colleagues care? Because it's affecting our states, it's affecting the country. Fentanyl overdose deaths have risen dramatically. We have to secure our border. This bill allows for that conversation, as well as give the aid to our allies so they can secure their borders. So the message is simple. We work together. We should care about what's happening in our respective states. We should care about what's happening with our colleagues across the aisle, and we should care what's happening as a national security basis for this country. America's watching, and we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing. And that's why we stepped up and we let the Speaker know, and we are hoping that we will have a good bill to bring across that the President will sign. So we're going to work hard in doing that.
The message may be simple and clear, and you guys present it quite well. The politics of it, unfortunately, seem to be quite the opposite in this moment, rather in terms of simple, quite difficult, actually. Congresswoman Gluesenkamp-Perez, who do you believe it is going to be harder to convince to support this effort? The hard right of the Republican conference or the hard left of the Democratic caucus?
I think the thing that we need to remind everyone is that this is not a bill that just, burns money paying people with clipboards to study something. This is good American jobs, family wage jobs, building munitions that support our values of democracy. And, I think it's easy to think about something as, what happens over there, and this is just about Europe and Russia. No. When you have an unprovoked attack on a democratic nation and you allow that to go unchallenged, you invite more chaos across the world. So it's not just about Ukraine. It's about, do we support these values of democracy, and how do we do that? And so I think the way that we talk about it really matters, and keeping it focused and narrow is going to be key to this legislation moving forward.
And key to getting the votes needed to come along with you, that's for sure. For both of you, I do want to, because there was a lot going on with elections today. Congresswoman Chavez-DeRemer, you told Politico at the end of January you didn't have any plans to endorse anyone anytime soon in the Republican presidential primary. We're standing by in just a little more than 30 minutes now to hear from Nikki Haley, who is going to be ending her campaign this morning. Are you happy to have Donald Trump at the top of the ticket for your reelection? Because that's, he is now going to very quickly be looking at being the party's nominee.
Yes, it seems like we're going to hear from that she will suspend her campaign, and the Republican nominee will be Donald Trump. And we will move forward with that. As far as my race goes, again, similar to 2 years ago, keeping it local is what matters. I'm a former mayor, I'm a mom, I'm a business owner. I work hard with my colleagues across the aisle. That is how a lot of these swing seats are going to be, and it is important to me to make sure that we stay focused on that. And so as we move through my campaign, I will stay focused on those issues of what matters. This right now is priority, and I would imagine in the next 30 minutes to an hour, other things will come a priority, and we'll take those on as they come forward.
You guys, I'm very sure you guys are capable of handling it all. There's no question in my mind about that. Finally to you, Congresswoman Gluesenkamp-Perez, in 2022, you won what had been a Republican-held seat. Looking at your re-election race, do you have concerns having Joe Biden at the top of your ticket?
I did not come here to be a cheerleader for either party. I am going to fight for the values I believe in, but I think that we have to turn things back towards a values and not like celebrity or personalities, because then power accrues to an individual and not to our cultural values. And I think we all lose when we make it about celebrity and not our compass, our moral compass.
Well, let's highlight here right now a Democrat, Republican coming together, standing shoulder to shoulder to talk policy and to push forward on policy where we can find shared values. It's good to see you both. Thank you both for coming on today.
Thank you, Kate. Thanks, Kate.
Sarah?
That was nice to see, Kate. I agree with you. All right, Nikki Haley, live pictures behind me. We are waiting for her big announcement, the announcement that she will suspend her 2024 bid for the White House. We have new reporting on how she made that decision. Also, right now, key testimony happening live in Georgia as the state Senate investigates Fulton County DA Fani Willis.
In just 30 minutes now, Nikki Haley is expected to end her presidential campaign, making remarks in South Carolina, which effectively moves this race into a general election rematch between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. CNN's Harry Anton is back with us to talk about this road ahead. And let's first talk about this moment that Nikki Haley finds herself in. What do you see in the numbers that shows that this is where the end of the road was for Nikki Haley?
Yeah, I mean, look, Kate, it comes down to numbers. It comes down to delegate math. And where we were before last night, look, 1,215 delegates are needed to win the nomination. Donald Trump was ahead, but he was only at 276. Nikki Haley was at 43. So, you know, a relatively close race, one in which Trump was still a long way from the nomination. But let's jump forward to where we were after last night. Look at that. What do we see? We see that Donald Trump was up to 1,040 delegates, very, very close to that 1,215 needed. So the fact of the matter was Nikki Haley at just 86 delegates. The math was the story of last night. It just became math that I think Nikki Haley looked at and realized there really wasn't much of a road to head with Donald Trump very close to clinching the nomination.
And I mean, that's why Super Tuesday is called that.
Yes.
I mean, that's because of the delegate math and because of what can happen and how the momentum can either be completely sucked out of your campaign or fueled, depending what happens. So, effectively, we look at a general election rematch.
Yes.
Where do Joe Biden and Donald Trump start out?
So let's go ahead and we're going to look at the race to 270, right? Because at the end of the day, it's all about delegates. Here's the 2020 map, right? Joe Biden won with 306 electoral votes. Donald Trump got 232. But look at where our projections are right now, our race ratings right now. What do we see? We see something completely different. We see Donald Trump at 272, Joe Biden at just 225. So if the election were held today, which it obviously isn't, we have months and months to go, Donald Trump would be a heavy favorite, and he is flipping states at this particular point, and we would expect it, like Georgia that Joe Biden won, Nevada that Joe Biden won, Arizona state Joe Biden won, toss-up. Same in Wisconsin, the upper Midwest. Same with Pennsylvania and Michigan, where we obviously held that primary last week at this particular point, leaning Republican. So, folks, if you have it in your mind that Donald Trump is just popular enough to win the Republican nomination, lose that thought, because at this particular point, when matched up against Joe Biden, Donald Trump is a favorite, which is something we couldn't say at any point in 2020 and really wasn't something that we could say at any point in 2016 when he was matched up against Hillary Clinton.
And a long general election ahead. Thanks.
Very long.
Thank you, Harry.
Thank you.
Sarah?
All right, happening right now, as we speak, a Georgia State Senate committee is holding a hearing, and you're watching that live behind me as the fight over DA Fani Willis, her fate intensifies. Right now, a defense attorney for one of Donald Trump's co-defendants is in this Willis's election subversion case, is testifying. You're seeing that happen after being subpoenaed in the case. CNN's Nick Valencia is joining us live. Give us some sense, Nick, of what we are going to see today and what this is all about and what she's saying at this hour.
Yeah, hey there. Good morning, Sarah. This is day one in what will very likely be a long process for this Georgia committee as it begins its investigation into whether or not Fani Willis misused public funds and whether or not there was a conflict of interest. And I want to be clear about something. This committee does not have the power to remove Fani Willis. They can recommend Fani Willis be removed. They can draft new legislation and try to turn that into law. But what they can do in the immediate is they have the power to subpoena, and they've done exactly that. And they've subpoenaed defense attorney Ashley Merchant, the attorney for Trump co-defendant Mike Roman, who was the first to launch these or level these bombshell allegations. I talked to her last night, and she says she expects to be asked about the money surrounding this case, the money that changed hand, documents that she was able to obtain, invoices, contracts, the invoices that showed the discrepancy of the payment between Nathan Wade and his other special prosecutors on this case, John Floyd and Anna Cross. He was paid about $100 more than those individuals. But we are not expecting to hear anything that we haven't heard in court already. Ashley Merchant was sworn in about 30 minutes ago. She's currently being questioned right now by this bipartisan committee, 6 Republicans, 3 Democrats, and they are expecting her to answer questions that they want to know about this potential misuse of public funds. We expect this to last several hours, and afterwards, Sarah, there will be a press conference held about any developments that we hear today. Sarah?
All right, I know you'll be watching every detail. Nick Valencia, thank you so much to you and your team. Okay.
And we are minutes away now from Nikki Haley, set to speak in Charleston, South Carolina, where she is expected to end her presidential campaign. This as the Biden campaign is casting Donald Trump as, quote, wounded, dangerous, and unpopular this morning. Why Biden's campaign manager says they now see a clear path to victory.
Happening any moment now, Nikki Haley is expected to end her presidential campaign. She will make that announcement during a speech in Charleston, South Carolina, hometown. Joining us now, CNN Chief National Affairs Correspondent Jeff Seleny. Jeff, I understand you've learned some new information about the decision-making behind the scenes for Haley to make this announcement today.
Good morning, Sarah and Kate. We did. I mean, talking to a variety of Haley advisors, particularly in the aftermath of the decision, we learned actually that the former governor made this decision last night as the results were coming in. And one of the reasons, I'm told, is that they were sort of eyeing this threshold of what could be 40% in some of these states, like she did in New Hampshire, like she did in South Carolina. They were looking at the suburbs of Virginia, and she did. Right outside Washington, she was over 50%. But overall, she did not meet that sort of threshold that they had in their mind of what she would need to really make the case to go forward. She did very well in some suburban areas, not quite as well in others, but never mind the fact that was not enough to overcome really the strength of the former president inside the party. So she made the decision to step aside, but she's suspending her campaign, I'm told. That language is always interesting because it leaves open the possibility should something happen, and she is not expected to endorse the former president at this point. She believes the burden is on him to sort of rally some of her supporters. But if we think back to the last week, one thing that caught our attention was that she was not advertising in Virginia, not advertising in North Carolina, in Texas, in Minnesota, in any of the Super Tuesday states. So this all happened organically. Her results last evening sort of came in. She was obviously getting a lot of news attention, but it became clear that she sort of knew that Super Tuesday would be the end of the road. But look, most presidential campaigns do not sort of end on this note. Most candidates do not leave in an elevated position. She certainly does leave in an elevated position, certainly from starting a year ago.
And Jeff, I'm just looking down. Kylie Atwood has some great new reporting as well that reinforces what you're getting at and hearing. Kylie Atwood reporting that top officials on Nikki Haley's campaign told major donors in recent weeks that Super Tuesday would dictate whether or not Haley stayed in the race, according to two sources familiar. Because that gets to the one thing that Nikki Haley didn't have a problem with leading up to just yesterday, Jeff, which was money, and that was one of the many ways and reasons why she was able to stay in the race.
Without a doubt. I mean, it certainly sustained her from Iowa, where she finished third, to New Hampshire, which she was a pretty distant second. But it sustained her because there was a market for her candidacy. Her donors certainly were interested in her, and many would like her to keep going. But the question here is, keep going to what? I mean, the reality is she is 52 years old. Does she have a future in this Republican Party? We shall see. Even at 52, I think the biggest question hanging over all of this is she the future of the party or is she the past? And by sort of going on beyond her capacity or ability to win, I think, perhaps could have been detrimental in the long run here. But she always talked about how she's an accountant by trade. She said, I'm not a lawyer, not a politician. She's an accountant. I'm told she did not want to end sort of in the red. So she, I would expect, has at least some money in her campaign coffers. She may have a significant amount, and that can be used for whatever comes next for her. But again, it's hard to know if she's the future of the party or her ideas represent the past in at least this era of the Republican Party.
Jeff, we heard from Lindsey Graham. Senator Graham was speaking to Dana Bash yesterday about what he thought that she was going to do and what he kind of expected her to do, which was come into the fold and eventually go ahead and endorse Donald Trump. What are you hearing from the campaign on that note as to what is she going to do when it comes to Donald Trump, who is going to be the nominee if you look at all the numbers?
Look, it's not going to happen immediately. It will definitely not happen in this speech. She's certainly leaving the door open for it to happen down the road. But she's been quite pointed in recent weeks about how she believes that the former president is not good for the Republican Party. She believes that the former president cannot win a general election. So it's hard to come back from that immediately, and it would not be good for her own brand, quite frankly. If she did, she would sort of look inauthentic. But you can tell, she knew, politically speaking, inside today's Republican Party, her saying those things was not going to help her necessarily. She sincerely believes them. So we will see about an endorsement down the road. It certainly will not come anytime soon, and not for sure today. Sarah,
and that's what I heard from a fundraiser and donor to Haley last night, that she became more of a cause than a campaign for that segment of the party. And is that the past? Is that the future? That's yet to be seen, as Jeff is reporting. It's great to see you, Jeff.
But it's a cause Donald Trump will need if he wants to win.
Great point. It's good to see you, Jeff. Thank you so much. And we are standing by right now for what is very likely the final remarks of Nikki Haley's presidential campaign. You see the podium right there, Charleston, South Carolina. We will take you to her announcement live.
All right, we have live pictures from Charleston, South Carolina, where any minute now, former Governor Nikki Haley is going to announce she is suspending her presidential campaign. We got word of that just a few hours ago. Even before, though, that news broke, the Biden campaign had sent around this strategy memo where they talked about the importance of Nikki Haley voters and how the fact that Donald Trump has had trouble with them is really an opportunity for the Biden campaign. With me now is the communications director for the Biden-Harris 2024 campaign, Michael Tyler. Michael, great to see you. Who is, do you think, the Nikki Haley voter? Describe to me who that person is.
Well, good morning, and thanks so much for having me. Yeah, listen, I think Nikki Haley's voters have made it very clear exactly who they are. These are the voters who have agreed with Nikki Haley when she stood up to Trump for the chaos, the division, the extremism that he represents insofar as the modern Republican Party right now. They are the voters who rejected MAGA extremism in 2020, who've rejected MAGA extremism in 2022, and moving forward, even throughout the beginning of the Republican primary process, are now rejecting Donald Trump and MAGA extremism moving forward. So if you agreed with Nikki Haley when she stood up to Trump for things like election denialism or the chaos and division that he represents, there is, in fact, going to be a home for them in Joe Biden's campaign. And so we're encouraging folks to go to joebiden.com and sign up if they agree.
How does the president plan to reach them? And maybe how does he plan to reach them in the State of the Union address tomorrow night?
Yeah, well, listen, I think the State of the Union address is going to serve as another moment to further cement the choice in this election for the American electorate writ large, and of course for Nikki Haley's supporters as well. You're going to have a president in Joe Biden who's going to lay out the historic record of accomplishment from the first 3 years. That's everything from creating over almost 15 million new jobs, 800,000 manufacturing jobs, the work that he's done to lower costs for Americans. But we'll continue to communicate the vision for the future, right? How we're going to continue to bring this country together. So we'll talk about what we want to accomplish, of course, starting with, restoring Roe v. Wade as the law of the land. But on all of the work that we have achieved so far, there's still work to do, right? The work that he has done to lessen the burden of student loan debt, right, to the tune of $138 billion. There's billions left to go. Getting the first bipartisan gun safety legislation done in a generation, but in the second term, banning assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, capping the cost of insulin at $35 for our seniors. In the second term, we're going to get the cap down to $35 for all Americans. So the work continues moving forward, and the contrast will be incredibly clear between a president who's fighting every single day to bring the American people together in search of solutions versus Donald Trump, who simply represents chaos, division, revenge, and retribution, and is only fighting this for himself. And so that's going to be the fundamental contrast that we present to the American people in the State of the Union and moving forward. And I think that's going to be something that resonates with the American electorate writ large, and obviously some of the Haley supporters here who continue to reject the extremism represented by Donald Trump.
Michael Tyler, great to talk to you. We know it was hard. You had to brave a fire alarm in your building, so we appreciate the work from you getting in front of the camera. Thank you so much for being with us. And Kate, Sarah, as we await this big announcement from Nikki Haley, it will be so interesting to see how she phrases it. How much does she lean into the work that Donald Trump will have to do to earn not just her support, but the support of her voters?
He said it all, and we are waiting. That's going to happen in just a few minutes here. Thank you so much for joining us. This is CNN News Central, CNN Newsroom with Jim Acosta. Up next.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Good morning. I'm Jim Acosta, joined by my colleague Wolf Blitzer. Any moment now, Nikki Haley will address the nation. Sources tell CNN that in minutes from now, she is expected to suspend her presidential campaign. We are told she will not endorse her rival, former President Donald Trump, at least for now.
I want to go to our reporter who's over at Haley's campaign headquarters in Charleston, South Carolina. Kylie Atwood is watching what's going on. Do we have any sense, Kylie, what we can specifically expect her to say?
Well, listen, I think Nikki Haley is going to come out here and thank the people that voted for her, talk about the factors that she ran her election on, conservative fiscal policy, the need to be close with U.S. allies when it comes to foreign policy, a number of things. But she is suspending her campaign today after having run for president for more than a year, being the final person to be standing when it comes to challenging former President Trump, but she is not expected to endorse Trump today. Her folks who are familiar with what she's going to say that she is going to go ahead and say that Trump needs to earn the support of those voters. She has repeatedly said throughout the entire course of her campaign that the Republican Party needs to be a party of addition, and she doesn't believe that Trump has been approaching his campaign that way. She has talked about the fact that she wants to give her voters an option. That's why she stayed on the ballot through Super Tuesday, but this was a decision that she made last night as her campaign was monitoring the results that were coming in. Jeff Zeleny spoke with a source, an aide on the campaign, who said that it was when they were monitoring those results that they determined that she wasn't going to hit the benchmarks that they had set, that she wasn't going to do well enough to keep her campaign alive. Now, we should note that Nikki Haley did win 2 states, D.C. and Vermont, throughout the course of this Republican primary. She did not win enough voters, however, to keep her campaign alive and to surpass the former president. But her campaign does feel like she attracted enough support from Republican voters to really make the case that there is a significant block of the Republican Party who is not with Trump. And that's why she is going to be telling them today, saying in her speech today, that he needs to make outreach to those voters. One of the things to note is that last summer, Nikki Haley did say that she would endorse the eventual nominee of the Republican Party, but it has been just really in recent days, Wolf, where she has distanced herself from that pledge. She has said that she doesn't feel like she is obligated to do that because the RNC is not the same RNC as it was last summer, because Donald Trump himself hasn't made that pledge. Now, I do want to note that this doesn't mean that Nikki Haley is definitively not going to endorse him ahead of November. What she's doing here is opening a conversation. She is trying to put herself in a position of power when it comes to brokering out those voters who have supported her. So we'll have to watch and see how the former president responds to that. But we should note that he has not been altogether welcoming at all when it comes to Nikki Haley supporters in the last few months. He even made comments that MAGA is going to be permanently barring any donors who had been supporting Nikki Haley. And when we spoke with Nikki Haley last week, a few reporters, she said that that was a comment that really struck her. It made her concerned about the future of the party. And so we'll have to see what she says about that today and what kind of pitch she wants him to make to those who have been supporting her.
Kylie, we're now told that she will be speaking, heading to the microphone within a minute or so, but give us a sense of the mood there among her supporters.
Well, listen, this is a small crowd in this room. It's people who have been working for Nikki Haley's campaign, some of her supporters here in the Charleston, South Carolina area. She's coming on stage, so we'll listen to what she has to say.
Good morning. Just over a year ago, I launched my campaign for president. When I began, I said the campaign was grounded in my love for our country. Just last week, my mother, a first-generation immigrant, got to vote for her daughter for president. Only in America. I am filled with the gratitude for the outpouring of support we've received from all across our great country. But the time has now come to suspend my campaign. I said I wanted Americans to have their voices heard. I have done that. I have no regrets. And although I will no longer be a candidate, I will not stop using my voice for the things I believe in. Our national debt will eventually crush our economy. A smaller federal government is not only necessary for our freedom, it is necessary for our survival. The road to socialism is the road to ruin for America. Our Congress is dysfunctional and only getting worse. It is filled with followers, not leaders. Term limits for Washington politicians are needed now more than ever. Our world is on fire because of America's retreat. Standing by our allies in Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan is a moral imperative. But it's also more than that. If we retreat further, there will be more war, not less. As important, while we stand strong for the cause of freedom, we must bind together as Americans. We must turn away from the darkness of hatred and division. I will continue to promote all those values, as is the right of every American. I sought the honor of being your president. But in our great country, being a private citizen is privilege enough in itself. And that's a privilege I very much look forward to enjoying. In all likelihood, Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee when our party convention meets in July. I congratulate him and wish him well. I wish anyone well who would be America's president. Our country is too precious to let our differences divide us. I have always been a conservative Republican and always supported the Republican nominee. But on this question, as she did on so many others, Margaret Thatcher provided some good advice when she said, quote, "Never just follow the crowd. Always make up your own mind." It is now up to Donald Trump to earn the votes of those in our party and beyond it who did not support him. And I hope he does that. At its best, politics is about bringing people into your cause, not turning them away. And our conservative cause badly needs more people. This is now his time for choosing. I end my campaign with the same words I began it, from the book of Joshua. I direct them to all Americans, but especially to so many of the women and girls out there who put their faith in our campaign. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for God will be with you wherever you go. In this campaign, I have seen our country's greatness. From the bottom of my heart, thank you, America. God bless you.
All right, that was former South Carolina Governor, former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley suspending her campaign, withdrawing from this race. She had some very interesting comments there as she was backing out of this campaign, essentially saying that she's not ready to endorse former President Donald Trump, saying that he needs to earn the support of her supporters, and made some very interesting comments, I think, a few moments ago, guys. We're joined now by Chief National Affairs Correspondent Jeff Zeleny, Chief Political Correspondent Dana Bash, or CNN National Political Correspondent Eva McKen. But one of the things that we heard Nikki Haley saying just a few moments ago, Wolf, was that America needs to stand with Ukraine.
She was very, very strong on the international issues. She said specifically that the U.S. needs to support Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan.
Right.
She went into specifics articulating that. And I also thought, even though she didn't formally endorse Trump, she came pretty close to doing so when she said, the time has now come to suspend my campaign. And as you know, Jeff Zeleny, the word suspend is specific It's a legal word. It's not end my campaign, suspend my campaign in order to be able to continue to control all those campaign dollars that she raised.
For sure. Suspend is a word that I think in this particular cycle, with all the wild cards, the age of the candidates, the legal cases, and just the fact that she won delegates, she's earned the right to suspend, not end her campaign. So I think that is important. But talking about Trump at the end there, this is now the time for his choosing, putting the burden on former President Donald Trump to win over her supporters. And as we've talked to so many of them over the last several months who have really grown to admire and love her, yes, there are some Democrats who have popped into her crowds to try and be mischief-making, if you will, or to send a message to Donald Trump, but many Republicans as well. There are many Republicans, and I'm thinking back to a conversation I had with one in Charlotte over the weekend, and she told me, I hope Donald Trump treats her kindly and brings her into the fold. And I said, what do you think the chances of that are? And she said, all we can do is hope. So I think now it will be interesting to see how he reacts to this. But she does not have to give an endorsement at this point. I think, I'm not even sure we should talk about that as much. I mean, the reality is few candidates leave the race in an elevated stature. She was the first one in, the last one out, and she has emerged in a far, far stronger position, whatever she may do.
And if I could just add to that, we're going to have so much time to talk about will he or won't he, will she or won't she, and where her supporters are going to go. But I think it's good to take a beat and note that she is the first Republican woman to win a contest.
Right.
And she won 2. Okay, there were a lot of contests that she lost.
And to get this far.
And to get this far. And
to raise as much money as she
and to raise as much money. And I do think that she's used that line since South Carolina a lot on the campaign trail, but the fact that her parents were immigrants and that her mother was able to vote for her daughter for president is just something to kind of let sink in, because it is a moment in history.
Yeah, and even, I mean, Nikki Haley does have some leverage in this campaign. I mean, if you look at how she did last night, she did win the state of Vermont, but there was a sizable sort of anti-Trump vote in a lot of these contests. And what she's essentially saying is, I'm going to be holding back on some of those supporters. You're not getting them yet, Donald Trump, unless you start to extend the olive branch a little bit, which is not really his forte.
She was clear that he is going to have to earn the support from her and her supporters. I was always struck. I've been to many of her rallies all across the country, South Carolina, Iowa, New Hampshire, Michigan, everywhere. And time again, you would meet Democrats at her rallies, independents, Republicans who had supported Trump in 2016 and then voted for Biden in 2020. And I think in this polarized environment, it takes a certain degree of political skill to be able to bring Democrats into the fold, to be able to attract these type of centrist voters. And so, yes, she is going to have a big role to play in the months ahead.
Yeah, and some of those Nikki Haley supporters may not go back to Donald Trump. Wolf. They just might not.
I thought it was the closest she came to actually coming close to endorsing him, Trump, was when she said, I congratulate him, referring to Trump, and wish him well.
Yeah.
Those were her words.
Yeah, well, and she's had a lot to say about Donald Trump during this campaign, and so she may have to start dialing things back too. I mean, Dana, one of the questions that I had listening, and Wolf is absolutely right, is she leaving the door open to some extent to the possibility of being his running mate? Might that?
I mean,
you'd have to do a whole lot of walking back.
Who knows?
There's a lot of videotape of stuff that she said about him and stuff that he said about her.
That's true.
That would be extraordinary.
That's true, but that was true of a lot of partners throughout our history, maybe even more vitriol between the two of them. But the next thing that she said, Wolf, when she said, or Jim, one of you just said that she said, I wish him well, as I would for anybody who would be our president.
Yes.
She couched it.
She couched it.
And closed the door to being a third-party candidate. Perhaps that is the most significant thing here as well. She said, I'm a Republican. So I'm told going forward she does plan to play a role trying to shape this party. She does believe that this sort of isolationist view that has really emerged in the Republican Party is not good for the country. If you look at the span of her career, she rose as a Tea Party candidate, which of course was the precursor to the Trump era. And now this is not her party. So it's really extraordinary. But at 52 years old, the question is she the past of the party, or could she still be the future? And to that question, we do not have an answer today.
We will find out. Kylie Atwood is over at Nikki Haley's campaign headquarters over there. Give us a sense, Kylie, of the reaction you're getting, the mood over there.
Well, listen, it was a small crowd in the room, mostly folks who have worked for her campaign or are close to Nikki Haley and live here in her hometown of Charleston, South Carolina, but they were cheering quite loudly when she came out on stage. Her remarks were short. The supporters in the room here have had a long night because most of them were monitoring the results from Super Tuesday as they were coming in, results that made it clear that Nikki Haley was going to have to suspend her campaign, as she just did. It is important to note, however, that she is playing up her leverage. Yes, she said that she congratulated former President Trump, who will now be the nominee of the party. She said that she would wish well to anyone who would be the next president of the United States. But as we were told ahead of this speech, she also said that Trump is going to have to earn the support of those who voted for her. And we'll have to watch to see how that plays out. She also made it very clear that she is not ready, even though she has lost this Republican presidential primary. She is not ready to give up on her vision for the future of the Republican Party, for shaping the Republican Party. She called again for term limits for politicians. She called for conservative fiscal policy. That's what she has called for time and time again. She also said that there is a moral imperative for the United States to stand with its allies, calling into question that isolationist policy that we have seen some Republicans begin to embrace. So it's very clear where she stands on the issues where she disagrees with former President Trump. And because she hasn't outright endorsed him today, she is giving herself an open door to continue being critical of him and, of course, watching to see how he engages with her voters. Now, what we don't know right now is if she's reached out to former President Trump or if she plans to. That will be a question that we will continue to ask those around her. But today, suspending her campaign after she became the first female Republican woman to win 2 primaries as part of the primary contest for president. Wolf.
All right, Kylie, stand by. You know, Jim, it was interesting when Nikki Haley said it's now up to Trump to earn the votes, and I hope he does that.
Yeah, and
that was significant, I think.
That's going to be a big moment if those two can make some peace after all that was said. And we should note, just in the last couple of minutes, Wolf, a statement from President Biden released by the Biden campaign. I do want to go to Kristen Holmes in just a moment. But Biden, the president, trying to get those Nikki Haley supporters before Donald Trump can get those Nikki Haley supporters, saying Donald Trump made it clear he doesn't want Nikki Haley supporters. I want to be clear there is a place for them in my campaign. Very telling, absolutely. Let me go to Kristen Holmes, who joins us now from West Palm Beach, Florida. Kristen, before we've even heard from the former president, the current president has weighed in. He wants those Nikki Haley supporters.
Yeah, now we've heard from the former president as well. And before I read you this statement, I just want to remind our viewers and everyone what the thing we've been saying over and over again, which is what Haley said. Now it is time for Donald Trump to reach out and earn those Republican voters who don't support him. While she was speaking, Donald Trump went after Nikki Haley over Super Tuesday, not address her dropping out, but this is what he said. Nikki Haley got trounced last night in record-setting fashion, despite the fact that Democrats, for reasons unknown, are allowed to vote in Vermont and various other Republican primaries. Much of her money came from the radical left Democrats, as did many of her votes, almost 50%, according to the polls. At this point, I hope she stays in the race and fights it out until the end. I'd like to thank my family, friends, and the great Republican Party for helping me produce by far the most successful Super Tuesday in history, and would further like to invite all of the Haley supporters to join the greatest movement in the history of our nation. Biden is the enemy. He is destroying our country. Make America great again. This is his reach out to those Haley supporters. We'll wait to see if we hear from him again now that she's officially dropped out. This was sent while she was speaking. But it clearly is a different message than what Nikki Haley was sending. One of the things that you mentioned, Jim, it would be very interesting to see if the two of them could make amends moving forward. One thing to be clear about, Donald Trump has had a problem with Nikki Haley long before it got this contentious in this Republican primary. He has been talking privately negatively about her since she called him and said that she would be entering the presidential race. Even before that, there were issues that he had privately with Nikki Haley because she came out against January 6th. So the likelihood of some kind of rekindling here seems very small, that they would come back together. But again, the messages could not be more different. He is going on the attack. And I will tell you, talking to some of his advisors and allies leading up to this morning, after we had learned that Haley would be dropping out, they were waiting to go on the offense. They thought she was going to come out and trash Donald Trump, which she didn't do. But clearly, this was a response to that preemptive thinking that she was going to go out there and trash Donald Trump. And he got out there saying that he trounced her, or that she got trounced, and really went on the attack rather than, trying to invite her supporters in. Now, of course, there's a line there at the end that says, all the supporters welcome them to join me. But that comes after he said that her supporters were also Democrats and on the radical left. So I think that this is what you could expect to hear from Donald Trump. I am told as of now there aren't plans for him to go to a camera to give any remarks. They were planning something when he meets that delegate threshold to become the presumptive nominee. But as of now, just expect to see him on social media and perhaps more of this. Not sure if the tone will change now that we've actually heard from Nikki Haley and it wasn't an offensive speech, but this is what his initial reaction is to Haley right now.
Fascinating.
Interesting. Very different reactions from Biden and from Trump, Eva, didn't you think?
Yeah.
Right. In Biden's reaction, he says that he wants these supporters and that though they may have policy disagreements, this is about the fundamental issues, preserving democracy, respect for the Constitution. And actually, that is what you heard from some Republicans that showed up to her rallies when you would say, well, ultimately, if the contest comes between Trump and Biden, many of them said, I would hold my nose and I would support Biden because ultimately I'm just too worried about what a second Trump term could mean. I'm concerned that he doesn't have respect for our institutions. And so you hear Biden off the bat leaning right into those anxieties.
I don't think, and you covered Trump for a long time.
Sure.
I wasn't surprised by his strong words and very critical words of Nikki Haley, who just suspended her campaign.
Yeah, in all caps, Wolf. Nikki Haley got trounced last night in record-setting fashion. I mean, I guess he's not saying that this was rigged on Super Tuesday. I guess he's confident in what took place last night across the country in all these different battleground states. I mean, Dana Bash, this is obviously what Donald Trump does, but you have to wonder, to Wolf's point, I mean, how does he get Nikki Haley supporters? Eva is absolutely right. In some of these close battleground states, Jeff Zeleny, you know this all too well, it may come down to these Nikki Haley supporters who say, you know what, and you can call them Nikki Haley supporters, they're sort of never Trump Republicans who are just not going to be comfortable with Donald Trump ever as president, and they're going to vote for Joe Biden.
What we saw from Donald Trump with that post was him being a sore winner.
Yeah.
And he can't get past himself in these moments in order to do what he needs to do strategically, politically, with people like Nikki Haley. But you know who can? The people around him. So this sort of juxtaposition, as he's doing his thing with his phone on his social media platform, his campaign puts out a Trump alert, breaking Trump alert, saying very specifically, Nikki Haley drops out. It's time for us to unite as a party and defeat defeat Joe Biden.
Yeah.
So they're on message, and as they try to raise money, which he desperately needs, it's the candidate, former president's message that is obviously the loudest.
His response on social media today reminded me of his New Hampshire response when we sat in Manchester and really saw him have a tantrum at being a winner, a sore winner indeed. We will see how all this comes together. There's no doubt that some Haley voters are going to put the Republican jerseys on and support him. But I've talked to as many of them as Eva has, and we heard clear that they voted for Trump once and they want to turn the page. So we will see. That's what this campaign will be about for 244 days. But it's extraordinary that really 51 days after the voting began in the Iowa caucuses, here we are, a rematch is brewing. But of all the wild cards, one that we probably wouldn't have expected is the Nikki Haley supporter wild card as well. We'll see what their voters do in the coming weeks.
We're getting a reaction from the Republican National Committee. Kristen Holmes is getting that reaction. Update our viewers on the breaking news.
Yeah, well, this is actually a really big deal given what it means for the party as a whole. So we've just gotten a statement from the chairwoman of the RNC, Ronna McDaniel, that congratulates Donald Trump. It says, congratulations to President Donald Trump on his huge primary victory. Also very gracious, it says, I'd also like to congratulate Nikki Haley for running a hard-fought campaign and becoming the first woman to win a Republican primary contest. Now, it also says that he is now the presumptive nominee. That is a big deal. You just heard Dana say this. He needs money. One thing the RNC is very good at, raising money. This means that Donald Trump, that RNC can fully back him because they have this neutrality clause, which means they won't get behind a candidate, even though we have seen a lot of support for Donald Trump within the RNC. They can actually get behind him. He can start using their infrastructure in various states. He can start using their cash in various states, their donor lists. All of that is a big deal for the former president, particularly given that one of the reasons they were so annoyed Nikki Haley was staying in the race was because they weren't getting access to all of this, including her donors, which is what they're also hoping for in terms of the money. The other thing to watch here is that Ronna McDaniel, the chairwoman, has said she would step down, she's leaving, after Donald Trump became the presumptive nominee. He has nominated Michael Whatley. He's out of North Carolina, the chairman of the GOP party there, someone who fought to overturn the 2020 election results. He has also nominated his daughter-in-law, Lara Trump, to be co-chair of the RNC and is planning on instating one of the top heads of his campaign, Chris LaCivita, as the chief operating officer in the RNC. All of this is a very big deal because what we talk about is Donald Trump remaking the Republican Party in his image. Now he is really doing that. We have seen all this coalescing behind him happening much more quickly than we saw back in 2016. Now he is taking the actual infrastructure of the party, putting his daughter-in-law in, someone who actually has his name, people who are his biggest backers, Chris LaCivita, again, a co-campaign manager. And that's not going to end there. We are also told that there are other members of the campaign who are going to be going to the RNC to fill in various roles. So you're really seeing them align here and getting behind the Republican Party is becoming the Trump Party right now.
Yeah, I mean, the RNC is looking more and more like a wing of the Trump organization. Kristen Holmes, all right, thank you very much. President Biden, as we were just saying a few moments ago, responding to Haley suspending her campaign. Let me go to Arlette Saenz, who's over at the White House for us. Arlette, tell us a bit more. I mean, the Biden campaign was pretty fast. Something tells me they might have had some of this typed out before Nikki Haley made that announcement at 10 o'clock this morning.
Yeah, Jim, and President Biden in his statement made a direct appeal for Nikki Haley's supporters, saying in the statement that there is a place for them in his campaign. Now, the Biden campaign believes that they have some room to potentially tap into moderate and Haley supporters who are turned off by former President Donald Trump. That is something the president spoke to in his statement, saying that they had worked to try to, or that some of the things they can coalesce around are fighting for democracy and also preserving the NATO alliance. In the statement, the president really went to great lengths to praise Nikki Haley for the role that she played in this campaign, specifically in calling out the former president. He said it takes a lot of courage to run for president. That's especially true in today's Republican Party, where so few dare to speak the truth about Donald Trump. Nikki Haley was willing to speak the truth about Trump, about the chaos that follows him, about his inability to see right from wrong, about his cowering before Vladimir Putin. Biden goes on to say Donald Trump made it clear he doesn't want Nikki Haley supporters. I want to be clear, there is a place for them in my campaign. Biden was perhaps even more explicit in a tweet that he sent out moments ago as well, where he said, quote, "You don't have to agree with me on everything to know MAGA extremism is a threat to this country." And then he highlights the fact that the former president attacked Nikki Haley's supporters, calling Nikki Haley a name and saying that those who contribute to his campaign would be barred from the MAGA movement. And this really highlights one of the tasks and challenges ahead for the Biden campaign as they're trying to make more ground with voters heading into November. The Biden campaign officials do believe there is a world where they can peel off some of these Haley supporters who are frustrated and don't want to see Trump secure a second term. I'm also told when it comes to fundraising, they believe that they could also tap into some of Nikki Haley's donor universe as well. And this really sets up the high stakes moment that the president will be facing tomorrow as he prepares for a State of the Union address. The president has been huddling with his team here at the White House, trying to put the finishing touches on that speech, which will now have an even bigger audience, especially as trying to make a more broad appeal to voters, not just Democrats, but also Republicans, including some of these Nikki Haley supporters.
All right, the fight for those Nikki Haley supporters is on, Wolf.
I thought Nikki Haley was very polite and gracious in her comments. Compare those with Trump, who was still very much, Dana, as you and I well know, as all of us know, he still remains in the attack mode.
It was on brand.
Yeah.
I think that's maybe the most concise way to put what we saw from Donald Trump. Yeah, on brand. And again, obviously, and we hear this from Kristen all the time, talking to the Trump campaign, the people around him now it's a far different campaign from what you covered in 2016, from what we covered in 2020. And part of it is that this is the third cycle with Donald Trump as a politician and as a candidate. Everybody knows what they're going to get. And so their challenge is to try to work around him, knowing that he isn't always going to be, maybe even rarely going to be on the message that they want him to be on. When it's something like this, where it is extremely delicate to get a lot of, not all of, but a lot of these supporters who won't just, as Jeff said, put on the Republican jersey. And they're going to have to try to find more avenues to get around that kind of rhetoric and that kind of behavior.
And I think the marching orders are clear for both of the presumptive nominees now. For the next 244 days, that's how long it is until November 5th, Election Day, they both have to rebuild their coalition. So stepping back from this, we are going to not see Nikki Haley every day. She will be, still playing a role in trying to help local candidates and down-ballot candidates. But I think it is clear, there's no doubt, that President Biden has to work on sort of rebuilding his fraying coalition of younger voters, Latino voters, black voters, other voters, progressives, of course. But Donald Trump also has to rebuild his coalition. So the question is, what does happen to that sliver of voters in the middle? We call them now Nikki Haley voters. We'll see if we still call them that by November. But for now, they are. And I think that they'll be watching how both sides react here. And I would not be at all surprised if President Biden mentions those Nikki Haley voters by name tomorrow night in his State of the Union address.
I wouldn't be surprised either. Eva, it's very interesting. It was only a 5-minute speech from Nikki Haley, or so 5 minutes, approximately 5 minutes, announcing her suspending of her campaign. But I thought it was really significant. She took a little time to say the world is on fire, her words, right now, and the United States must stand by allies, Ukraine, Israel, Taiwan. It's a moral imperative. Those were strong words coming in a speech announcing she was exiting this race.
Yeah, and it was core to her argument, her election argument, that she had a foreign policy background and she would be prepared for the presidency. And some folks showing up to her rallies, the Democrats that I spoke to showing up to her rallies would tell me explicitly they liked where she stood on Ukraine, on supporting Ukraine. I think what we are going to see in the weeks ahead is Democrats really amplify all of the insults that the former president lodged at her supporters and try to really frame this contest in broad terms to bring them in. So this is going to be a conversation about the future of America, about American democracy, about the Constitution. That is how it seems like they are telegraphing they're going to try to bring those voters into their camp.
We'll see how that works out.
And there's going to be, not just these personal differences between Trump and Nikki, policy differences. Mm-hmm. And we should note, just this morning, President Zelensky confirmed there was a strike in Odessa, Ukraine this morning, leaving people dead and wounded. Zelensky was in Odessa at the time. He said he could see the strike. He could hear what was going on. This just tells you what the clear contrasts are in terms of the campaign.
We're going to have a live report on that.
We're going to
coming
talk
up.
about that.
That's a major development.
Major development.
Potentially within gunfire.
Yeah, and we haven't even mentioned that this morning, but we're going to be talking about that in just a few moments. Our panel, thanks very much, guys. Really appreciate it. We're continuing to follow this breaking news. Nikki Haley suspending her campaign, setting up a Trump-Biden rematch. We'll have much more on all of this after a quick break.
All right, we've got some breaking news coming in right now. The Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell is endorsing former President Trump. Let's go to CNN's chief congressional correspondent, Manu Raju. He's joining us from Capitol Hill with the latest. Update our viewers, Manu.
Yeah, this has actually been more than 3 years since Senator McConnell spoke to Donald Trump. At that time, he's acknowledged, Mitch McConnell did in December of 2020, that Joe Biden had won the presidential election, and that prompted Donald Trump to essentially cut off all ties with the Republican leader. Then in the aftermath of January 6th, Mitch McConnell pointedly blamed Donald Trump for those actions, calling him morally and practically responsible for the events on January 6th. But so they have not had any real ties or discussions, and he has not endorsed them up until now, in the aftermath of Nikki Haley stepping aside from the split race. The Republican leader issuing a statement saying that he will, in fact, endorse Donald Trump for the presidency. I'll read you some of his statement, Wolf. He said it's become abundantly clear that former President Trump has earned the requisite support of Republican voters to be our nominee for President of the United States. He said it should come as no surprise that as nominee, he will have my support. He goes on to talk about how they work together on issues involving the tax overhaul that passed in Congress, as well as Mitch McConnell's role in ensuring 3 of Trump's Supreme Court justices were confirmed to the bench. He says, I look forward to the opportunity of switching from playing defense against the terrible policies the Biden administration has pursued to a sustained offense geared towards making a real difference and improving the lives of the American people. So, Wolf, this is the Republican leader has oftentimes just refused to even say Donald Trump's name for the past several years. You ask him a question about Donald Trump, he said that he does not want to talk about the presidential race. Trump, in fact, has leveled attack after attack against Senator McConnell after those comments that McConnell made on the Senate floor, blaming him for January 6th. In fact, Trump leveled a number of racist attacks, too, against his wife, a Taiwanese immigrant, someone, Elaine Chao, who was the cabinet secretary under Donald Trump himself. Chao, of course, stepped aside in the aftermath of January 6th. So they have a very tense relationship, really no relationship whatsoever. But McConnell has indicated for some time that whoever the nominee is of his party, he will fall in line and back the Republican nominee, and that's exactly what he is doing here. Of course, Mitch McConnell will not be working with Donald Trump if Trump is elected as president. McConnell's already said he would step aside from the leadership position that he has held for the past 17 years and give way to other potential candidates. And 2 of those Republicans who are running right now, John Cornyn and John Thune, both of them have endorsed Donald Trump as well. I just caught up with Senator John Thune, the number 2 Republican who wants to take McConnell's job. He downplayed some of his past concerns he had about Donald Trump's viability as a candidate in the suburbs, and Thune has for some time, Wolf, expressed concerns about how Trump could play in key battleground states, particularly as they try to regain the Senate's in the fall, Wolf. But he downplayed those, rallied behind Donald Trump, said that there'll be a unified ticket in the fall. It really shows you how the party establishment now lining up behind Donald Trump in the aftermath of his victory here. Now the presumptive nominee with the support of the Senate Republican leader.
And we'll see how that battle for the Senate Republican leadership plays out. Manu Raju, good reporting as usual. Jim.
All right, thank you, Wolf. And joining me now is former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson, a former Republican candidate in this year's presidential race. Governor, thanks so much for joining us. I do want to ask you about Nikki Haley dropping out of the race, but there is some more breaking news to talk about. That's what Manu Raju was just talking about a few moments ago. Mitch McConnell now endorsing Donald Trump. What do you make of that?
Well, it surprises me, actually, because he's not going to be running for re-election. There wasn't any motivation. I think it really indicates the draw of the team. We've been on the Republican team all our life. It's hard to switch from that. It's hard to say we're not going to support the nominee of the party. It's very difficult for me as well. And so it is a surprise, that announcement today from Senator McConnell, because he's been very, very clear in the past as to holding Donald Trump morally responsible for January 6th and his disagreement with them. So I don't think that you can overlook that even as you look to the future. I thought Nikki Haley's announcement today was classy, and hats off to her for running a good race and for staying in there through Super Tuesday.
Yeah, and Governor, I do want to ask you about that because Nikki Haley made it very clear when she announced that she's withdrawing from the race that, she has her supporters and she is not yet inclined to endorse Donald Trump. And I think what she wants to hear is something of an olive branch coming from the former president, which is obviously going to be a tough sell. I mean, what is your sense of it? The President Biden is already making an appeal for those Nikki Haley supporters. What do you think those supporters are going to do?
Well, I think they're going to be divided. Some are going to sit it out. Some will be focusing on congressional and Senate races. Others might switch to Biden. Many of them will go to Donald Trump because they have historically supported the nominee of the party. So it'll be divided, and they're up for grabs. And so, yes, it's incumbent upon Donald Trump to do his job as a front runner and reach out to them. And for example, with Nikki Haley, you would think the obvious thing is that you'd reach out, you'd say, I know you've got to think about this, but we want you to make a primetime speech during the convention. We value you, and negotiate her support. Obviously, she wants to be able to showcase her ideas and make that case at the convention, and she should be able to do that. And Donald Trump can bring her in with that kind of outreach, perhaps.
And Governor, I did want to ask, you have refused to endorse Donald Trump for president. If I'm not mistaken, that hasn't changed. What is your mindset on all of that? Any chance you could change your mind?
Well, it's very troubling to me, first of all. I mean, I've said very clearly, I think Donald Trump is the wrong direction for our party and our country. I endorse Nikki Haley. I want to see what comes out of the convention, but do not expect an endorsement from me for Donald Trump in this election. I'm a loyal Republican. I'm going to fight hard this year, but we see the establishment now becoming Donald Trump, and it's a direction that I don't want to see our party go or our country go.
You're not there yet.
I'm not there yet, and it's very clear whenever you look at our relationship with our allies, whenever you're looking at the incredible challenges that he faces with his court case and its alleged criminal conduct. This is not something that I, as a former federal prosecutor, can sign up for. And so don't expect that to happen as we go forward.
All right, Governor Hutchinson, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
Strong words from the governor, indeed.
Absolutely.
We're continuing our breaking news coverage this morning. Nikki Haley suspending her 2024 presidential campaign. Listen to this.
In all likelihood, Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee when our party convention meets in July. I congratulate him and wish him well. It is now up to Donald Trump to earn the votes of those in our party and beyond it who did not support him. And I hope he does that.
And with Nikki Haley's departure, the Trump-Biden rematch is now set. Let's discuss this with CNN senior political commentators Anna Navarro and Van Jones and Republican strategist Michael Singleton. Anna, give me your bottom line assessment right now of what's going on.
I think today was a reality check. What we're seeing is a Republican reality check. Look, I think there's a lot of Republicans who don't want to vote for Trump, who saw in Nikki Haley a life raft. A lot of them weren't Nikki Haley voters, but she was the vehicle to issue that protest vote. She was what stood in between them and Donald Trump. It is now absolutely the reality that this is a binary choice between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. I am not surprised that Mitch McConnell has come out and endorsed him. We all know Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump hate each other. It's mutual. But Mitch McConnell has been a Republican his entire life. His reason of being, his raison d'etre, is partisanship, is getting Republicans elected. And what he is signaling with this is, look, I hate the guy, but I'm drinking my medicine because I am a party guy. I think Asa Hutchinson is absolutely right. There's going to be some Republicans who come back home. But you never underestimate Republicans' ability to do that. They did that after we heard, a lot of Republicans did that after we heard Donald Trump on those Access Hollywood tapes. Some of them will not vote, and some of them will vote for Biden. I would be shocked if a Liz Cheney came out and endorsed Trump. I would be shocked if a Mitt Romney came out and endorsed Trump. If Nikki Haley or Mitch McConnell do, that to me is not shocking.
Well, let me play a few clips for you, Anna, and get your thoughts. She was pretty gracious, I thought, today in wishing him well, congratulating him. But listen to what she said in recent days and weeks about Trump. Listen to this.
Donald Trump got out there and just threw a temper tantrum. Everything he touches, we lose. I don't believe Donald Trump can beat Joe Biden. How much more losing do we have to do before we realize maybe Donald Trump is the problem?
So do you still think she's eventually going to endorse him?
Well, if we could sit here and we could watch video all day of horrible things that Ted Cruz said about Donald Trump, of horrible things that Marco Rubio said about Donald Trump, of horrible things that Lindsey Graham said about Donald Trump, and I could go on and on. We could literally sit here all day. So do I think it's still possible that she endorses Donald Trump? Yes. I think Nikki Haley is going to do what's best for Nikki Haley and preserving her options in the Republican Party and in her political future.
Let me bring in Sir Michael Singleton and get his reaction as well. Just yesterday, Sir Michael, Trump was tearing into Nikki Haley, calling her crazy and a very angry person. Listen to this.
She's gone crazy. And I've never seen anything like it. She pulls up a piece of paper, which is false, tells a lot of false things. She's gone haywire. She hasn't lost too many elections, I guess, and she's getting nowhere. She's actually going down. Her numbers are going down. So, and she's a very angry person. So we'll see if she straightens out. Maybe she will.
What do you think? What's your reaction to all of that, Sure, Michael?
I mean, look, Wolf, I think that the former president would be smart and wise, strategically speaking, to lessen the negative rhetoric against a two-term governor, former UN ambassador who served in his cabinet position. One of the good things that I think occurred with Nikki Haley staying in this race is that the Trump campaign now strategically is aware of where their weaknesses are. As a strategist, I've been through this process on 3 presidential campaigns. You want to know every precinct, every county in a state where your candidate is struggling. So as I'm doing those sort of voter profiles, who are the voters that we need to make additional room, if you will, to get them on our side? I want to know where they are. The Trump campaign is now incredibly equipped with knowing exactly where those voters are. So he needs to extend that olive branch and ask her to work with me to help reach out to some of those Republican voters who are skeptical of a potential Trump return to the White House.
Yeah, and Van, I want to bring Van Jones in. I mean, Van, let's talk about this. Across 6 states that voted last night, we can show this to our viewers, a majority of the Republican electorate has not been willing to acknowledge the legitimacy of President Biden's victory in the 2020 election. But Van, I mean, I'm searching around, looking through all of Donald Trump's comments since the results from last night. I have not heard him say that any of the results last night were rigged or erroneous or there were any. So does that mean that we should have total faith and confidence, that even Trump supporters should have total faith and confidence in our electoral process in this country? The matter's been put to rest, hasn't it?
Apparently only when Trump is winning.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so, let me speak from my heart and let me speak from my head. From my heart, I tell you, this is a heartbreaking moment, and not just for people in the United States. If you're a Ukrainian soldier, looking at a wall of Russians coming at you and having to ration your bullets, today is a bad day, because one of the great champions of the United States being strong for our allies, strong for democracy, just went down in defeat today. And you feel more alone and more afraid of the future. If you're in Poland, if you're in Europe, and you're looking at a wall of Russians coming for you and saying, where's the United States? Today is not a good day. So from my heart, this is not a good day. From my head, What is Nikki Haley doing? What was that speech? What is she trying to play for? I think three things. Number one, why is she withholding her endorsement? Ron DeSantis, as soon as he got out, endorsed Trump and was belittled and sidelined and made look like an idiot. So she would be crazy to endorse now. I agree with Anna. She may endorse, but she shouldn't endorse now. Look at what happened to DeSantis. Number two, dollars. Trump is broke. She is sitting on the biggest donors in American politics. She could be a bank, or she could be somebody who closes the bank door. So she has real power, not voting power now, but dollar power. She knows to use that. And then number three, it is just hard. Remember Hillary Clinton, 2016, to turn your supporters around. Even if you want to, you can't do it in a day. So if you look at Nikki Haley, she's smart to hold her cards, to play her cards, to figure out, can she get this party to do something to keep America from abandoning democracy around the world. I hope she continues to play a constructive role. She's done a good job for her party and the country so far, but this is a bad day for democracy, not just in the United States, but around the world.
And Van, what does President Biden need to do at this point to earn those Nikki Haley supporters, bring them into the fold? We saw the Biden campaign putting out a statement from President Biden almost immediately after Nikki Haley walked off that stage in South Carolina. What do you think?
I think he needs to talk to her donors and her supporters and say, if you want to, a year from now, watch Russian tanks rolling through Europe, then endorse Donald Trump and get on that bandwagon. But understand, you're going to wake up one morning and you're going to see horror across Europe, and you're going to have American soldiers, sailors having to go over there and do something that we could have done with dollars, we're going to have to do with blood. If you want to continue to see the country being divided and unable to govern itself and treat itself well, get on that Trump train. But you've got a place over here. Now, he also, I think, needs to make a stronger case for what he is going to do to keep the economy moving in a good direction for people who go into grocery stores and can't pay for their groceries. He says he's going to sick the DOJ and the FTC on these grocers, these corporate grocers that are ripping off Americans. He needs to lean into that for the voters. But for the people like us who care about a democracy around the world, they have a binary choice. We're out of NATO and Russia is running over Europe, or you stand with Joe Biden.
It's very interesting indeed. Anna, let me get back to President Biden. He had some major victories. He really didn't have much of an opposition last night, but it was interesting. In Colorado, 8% of the Democrats who showed up to vote voted uncommitted. The number was close to 20% in Minnesota. What do you make of that?
I think they're clearly sending this administration a message that they are very unhappy, in particular with the Israel-Gaza issue. I mean, it is what it is. And I think this administration is listening. I think this administration is taking it to heart. We saw a change of policy, a major change of policy this weekend announced by Vice President Kamala Harris when she was in Alabama. And I think a lot of that has to do with what's actually happening on the ground, with some of those very heartbreaking, heart-wrenching images we are seeing coming out of Gaza, but also because it's very hard to maintain something when the American people don't support it. And they are listening to this. They are listening and they're taking stock and they're working really hard for a resolution. They're working really hard to get the hostages released. They're working really hard to have humanitarian aid brought into Gaza. So I think it's having an effect. And I think these voters, though, now are faced with a binary choice. The binary choice is Joe Biden, who's working really hard towards a two-state solution, or Donald Trump. What's the first thing he did when he became president in 2016? The Muslim ban. So if you think the folks in Gaza have a better shot under Donald Trump, I don't know what you're thinking.
Yeah, and Shermichael, I mean, getting back to, what does Nikki Haley do? I can't imagine. I mean, we saw Mitch McConnell almost immediately after Nikki Haley got out of the race endorsing Donald Trump. I just don't. Could we see Nikki Haley going to Mar-a-Lago a la Kevin McCarthy and making peace with Donald Trump? That just sounds like an otherworldly concept.
I don't think it'll be immediate, Jim, but I do eventually think she'll get there. Van mentioned a point about her donors. Quite a few well-known individuals in the Republican Party, they've given the presidential candidates all the way from Romney, campaign I worked on. She could also convert her presidential campaign to a leadership PAC. Now, we don't really talk about this often on cable news, but essentially what that means for the viewers is that Nikki Haley could transfer that money to a new organization that will then allow her to play in congressional races, senatorial races. So if she's thinking about 4 years from now, 2028, she has an opportunity to position herself as really a queen maker, if you will, to say these are the types of Republican candidates we should support and endorse as we move the party forward.
We're talking about voters like if they were marbles. Voters are not marbles. You just don't pick up your marbles and put them over here. And, you know, Van was talking about Hillary Clinton's supporters and how Hillary Clinton supporters were Hillary Clinton supporters. They were not anti-Obama supporters.
Right, that's right.
Sanders supporters in 2016 were Bernie Sanders supporters. They were not anti-Hillary.
Just because
folks.
Nikki Haley goes back and supports
Donald Trump. A lot of the folks that we are calling Nikki Haley, a lot of those marbles are anti-Trump folks who are going to have to decide for themselves what they do.
But Anna, we do know that PBS, NPR had a poll that came out that showcased 82% of them are likely to vote for Donald Trump. Now that gives around 12% remaining. So if Haley endorses Trump, can maybe 3 or 4% out of that 12 say, okay, we'll vote? That could make a substantial difference in key battleground states.
All right, and I do have to cut in because we do have some breaking news that we have to get to right now. Guys, thank you very much for that terrific discussion. Breaking news out of Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky says a strike has hit near where he and the Greek Prime Minister were traveling in the port city of Odessa on the Black Sea. Zelensky says there are fatalities and injuries. Obviously, the Ukrainian president is okay. But let's go to CNN's Claire Sebastian. She joins us now with the very latest. Obviously, when we saw this headline, Claire, a lot of concern in the United States, obviously around the world. What can you tell us?
Yeah, we're still getting information in about this, Jim, but we believe this happened at around 10:40 this morning Kyiv time. That's about 7 hours ago. And it happened while President Zelensky was meeting with the Greek Prime Minister in the port city of Odessa. This is the largest Ukrainian seaport on the Black Sea, regularly targeted. And in fact, they visited the site of a very deadly attack for civilians on Saturday, a 9-story residential building where 12 people were killed. But as for this strike today, President Zelensky saying that they could see and hear it. We don't know exactly how close it was to their convoy or where exactly they were when it hit or what exactly was the target at this point. But the fact that it happened very close to where they were, that President Zelensky was meeting with the Greek Prime Minister, the head of state of a NATO country at the time, obviously raising significant questions. They did appear at a press conference shortly after, both of them uninjured. And we are, of course, waiting for more information on the number of dead and wounded, because President Zelensky has confirmed that there are dead and wounded as a result of this.
Yeah, very disturbing developments indeed. Claire Sebastian, thank you very much. And our next hour of Newsroom starts right after a short break.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Good morning. Welcome back to the CNN Newsroom. I'm Jim Acosta alongside Wolf Blitzer. Wolf, a lot of breaking news this morning.
We're following a lot of breaking news today. Nikki Haley, as all of our viewers now know, has suspended her presidential campaign after Donald Trump's near sweep on Super Tuesday. Haley did not endorse her now former 2024 rival last hour in her address to the nation, about a 5-minute address to the nation. Instead, she urged Trump to earn the support of her voters. The former president did pick up a major endorsement just a few minutes ago from the soon-to-be former Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, despite the fact that the two men have not necessarily spoken in more than 3 years.
That's right, Wolf. And today there is no longer any doubt the GOP is Donald Trump's party, and Donald Trump is the GOP. His iron grip solidified, his dominance largely unquestioned. The majority of Republican voters in 6 Super Tuesday states say he is fit for the presidency, even if he is convicted of a crime. It marks one of the most stunning comebacks in American politics. CNN's Kylie Atwood is at Haley's campaign headquarters in Charleston, South Carolina. Kylie, on this very busy morning, you were there for her speech a short time ago. What can you tell us? What stood out to you?
Well, listen, Nikki Haley said she has no regrets. She said she is filled with gratitude. She also said that even though she is suspending her presidential campaign today after running for president for more than a year, she's going to continue to use her voice for the issues that she cares about. And when it comes to former President Trump, the person that she has been challenging, really sharpening her attacks on him over the course of the last few months, she congratulated him, but she also said that he is going to have to work to earn the support of the folks that have supported her throughout the course of this primary. Listen to what she said on that.
It is now up to Donald Trump to earn the votes of those in our party and beyond it who did not support him. And I hope he does that.
Now, Nikki Haley playing up her leverage here because she knows that there is a faction of the party that voted for her, a significant amount of voters in some of these states, even though she was only able to win 2 states, Vermont and D.C., as part of this Republican primary process. There was a faction of the party that was with her, and she believes they are still with her. But she did also have a forgiving tone when it came to Trump here. The race between the two of them has become quite personal over the course of the last few months and weeks here, but she said that she does hope that he is able to win over the support of those who have voted for her. We'll have to watch and see how that conversation plays out. Wolf.
All right, Kylie, stand by. We're going to get back to you. I want to go to Capitol Hill right now, where the Senate Minority Leader, Mitch McConnell, has just announced he's endorsing Trump for president. Our chief congressional correspondent, Manu Raju, is with us. Manu, did this come as a surprise, given, shall we say, politely, their complicated relationship?
Well, McConnell has indicated for some time that he would endorse the eventual nominee, but he has barely uttered Donald Trump's name in the aftermath of January 6th. In fact, he pointedly blamed Donald Trump in that scathing floor speech in the aftermath of January 6th, calling him morally and practically responsible for the events of that day, and then would not endorse him as the candidate, said he would wait to see what would happen in this race. But ultimately, putting out a statement, he said that he is the nominee, and obviously he's going to support him. In his statement, he goes on to talk about some of the legislative achievements from Donald Trump's time in office, confirming 3 Supreme Court nominees, and said that he's ready to get behind Trump. Now, this is not just McConnell. This is the Republican establishment falling in line behind him, despite their past concerns about Trump, things that he has said, and his viability as a candidate, particularly when it comes to suburban voters, who will be critical in November. I just caught up with the #2 Senate Republican who wants to succeed Mitch McConnell as Republican leader, and I asked him about his past concerns about Donald Trump. Are you still concerned about Trump's viability in the suburbs and the impact down ticket as your candidate?
I think we got going to have a united ticket going into the fall, and we'll go out and all help aggressively win those people in suburban areas, independent voters. It's now, it's a straight up one-on-one.
But you've been concerned about his message, his ability to communicate with suburban voters in particular. You have repeatedly voiced that concern. Do you still have that concern?
Well, I think that he will, and our ticket will, and all of us are going to be working together, obviously, not only on the presidential race, but on Senate races around the country. We'll work to unify people behind the things that we're going to be offering in terms of solutions for the future of this country. And I think that will appeal to the middle of the electorate, to independents, suburban voters.
Now, Thune ultimately did endorse Donald Trump, even though he had reservations about him, even though he himself had a bit of a rocky relationship here. But, Wolf, you're seeing the party fall in line. Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell in particular have had a very frosty relation. Trump has been attacking McConnell for some time, pretty regularly on the campaign trail and on social media, attacking his wife, Elaine Chao, and the like. But Mitch McConnell falling in line, saying it's time for the party to unite. And now that Trump is the nominee, he'll get behind him.
We will see how all that unfolds up on Capitol Hill. Manu Raju, thanks very, very much.
Yeah, and CNN's Kristen Holmes is live for us in West Palm Beach, Florida, right down near Mar-a-Lago. Kristen, what is the Trump campaign's plan to pivot to the general election, and is it in sync with the candidates' comments this morning?
Donald Trump's campaign had already pivoted to the general election. They were talking about how the next couple of weeks were really going to look like expanding their ground game, how they were going to build out in states like Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, those battleground key states, Pennsylvania being one of them as well. But I do want to note one thing that happened, because you heard Manu there talking about these lawmakers, the Republican Party really falling in line behind the former president. We also heard from the Republican National Committee. They issued a statement saying, essentially, congratulations to Donald Trump. But the real key part of this is that they acknowledge him as the presumptive Republican nominee for president. The reason why that is so key is because once someone is the presumptive nominee, the RNC no longer is neutral with a candidate, and they get all the resources, meaning Donald Trump gets all the resources that the RNC has. That means access to funds, fundraising, donor lists, infrastructure in various states. Donald Trump's campaign needs this. As we have reported time and time again, they have kept a very lean staff, a very small staff, and they need more money. They were waiting for this moment to become the presumptive nominee. It's also part of why they were so annoyed that Nikki Haley stayed in the race, because they wanted access to all of these resources. The other thing to note, it's really the Republican Party becoming the party of Donald Trump. I know we have said this for years, but it couldn't be more clear in what is happening right now. Keep in mind, the chairwoman, Ronna McDaniel, has said that she's going to step down after Donald Trump becomes the presumptive nominee. That is because Donald Trump had grown frustrated with McDaniel. Now he has nominated the head of the North Carolina Republican Party, Michael Whatley, who focuses on elections, to be the chairman. He also nominated his daughter-in-law, Lara Trump, to be the co-chair. On top of that, his campaign manager, or co-campaign manager, Chris LaCivita, is expected to go into the role of chief operating officer. I'm also told that various other campaign staffers have been approached about various positions within the RNC. You are seeing a full alignment of the Republican Party and Donald Trump really coming together right now, even faster than you would have ever seen before.
All right, Kristen Holmes, thank you very much. Really appreciate that update.
It's interesting. The Biden campaign at the same time is also weighing in on Nikki Haley's exit from this presidential race and making a direct appeal to her supporters in the process. Let's go to our White House correspondent, Arlette Saenz. Arlette, what exactly is President Biden suggesting right now?
Well, Wolf, President Biden wasted no time in trying to reach out to Nikki Haley's supporters, saying that there's a place for them in his campaign. It comes as Biden campaign officials really believe that this race has now crystallized after Super Tuesday between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And one of the main challenges and tasks ahead for them is trying to pull in more moderate voters and potentially Haley supporters who are turned off by Donald Trump into the Biden fold. Now, in a statement released moments ago, the president praised Nikki Haley for her role in this campaign, saying specifically, quote, "It takes a lot of courage to run for president. That's especially true in today's Republican Party, where so few dare to speak the truth about Donald Trump." Nikki Haley was willing to speak the truth about Trump, about the chaos that always follows him, about his inability to see right from wrong, about his cowering before Vladimir Putin. Biden goes on to say, Donald Trump made it clear he doesn't want Nikki Haley's supporters. I want to be clear, there is a place for them in my campaign. The president was even more explicit in a social media post after that statement. He said, quote, "You don't have to agree with me on everything to know MAGA extremism is a threat to this country. We need everyone on board. Join our campaign." And if you take a look at the bottom there, the president specifically highlighted a previous social media post from Donald Trump where he called Nikki Haley by name and said that those contributing to her campaign would not be part of the MAGA movement going forward. And really, Biden campaign officials are viewing this as an opportunity to try to siphon off some of these Republican supporters, moderate supporters who were backing Nikki Haley. They believe that they can make some inroads when it comes to suburban voters, moderate voters who simply do not want Trump to have a second term in office. Of course, there are many challenges facing Biden himself within his own coalition, but that will be one of the plays that they try to make in the coming months as they're trying to secure that second term in the White House.
Lots of politics going on right now, and it's only going to intensify in the coming days and weeks and months ahead. Arlette Saenz at the White House, thank you very much.
And here with us now to discuss, CNN political director David Chalian, CNN political commentators Maria Cardona and Alice Stewart. Maria is a Democratic strategist, and Alice is a Republican strategist. David, to you first. A lot happening this morning. Where do things? I mean, the general election campaign is on, and we're seeing Trump and Biden trying to get those Nikki Haley supporters. It's going to be a tough sell, probably from both sides of this.
Yeah, and with our polling director, Jenna Jessa, have been looking at some numbers this morning to try to understand this conversation about Nikki Haley voters. Who are they, and what did her composition of voters look like? So across the 6 states that we have exit polls for in this contest, 48% of Haley voters were Republicans. 41% of Haley voters were independents, and 11% of Haley voters were Democrats. So what we're calling Haley voters are actually going to be independents, never Trump or Republicans, and some Democrats. So what we're looking at is pieces of the Biden 2020 coalition. I mean, in our January poll, we found 19% of Haley supporters said they voted for Joe Biden in 2020. So there is overlap there. That's why you see the Biden statement as what it is, because they understand this may not be a very hard sell. These are people with some affinity for Joe Biden. Perhaps they voted for him in 2020 as an anti-Trump measure, and so trying to keep them in the fold. Obviously, the Trump campaign, as Nikki Haley alluded to in her remarks, will need to court some of this support as well. Remember, Donald Trump lost to Joe Biden in 2020 because he lost independent voters by 13 percentage points to him. Well, where are independent voters in the context of this Republican primary? They're with Nikki Haley. Donald Trump's going to need some of those independents back into his fold if he is going to succeed in getting back to the Oval Office.
Yeah, and 2 very different reactions from Biden and Trump. Biden trying to, extend the olive branch, make that outreach to those Nikki Haley supporters. Donald Trump saying he trounced Nikki Haley, sort of tap dancing on her political grave. And let's talk about the Mitch McConnell factor here as well, Alice. It wasn't that long ago when McConnell was going after Trump for his actions on January 6th. Let's look at this right now.
There's no question, none, that President Trump is practically and morally responsible for provoking the events of the day. No question about it.
I mean, Alice, this is quite a pivot.
Yeah, there's going to be quite a laundry list of people with similar statements that McConnell had that are now on board with Donald Trump. And look, you've looked further in Donald Trump's statement this morning. He is appealing to Haley voters. He is saying, I'm welcoming you to our campaign. Our enemy now is Joe Biden, and his policies have hurt this country, and it's time to join, as he says, the greatest movement in political history and take out Joe Biden. And it's really important to note that he is going to work on addition rather than division, and that's the only way to move forward. And look, you can't understate the significance of what the fact that he will be the presumptive nominee means moving forward. As Kristen said, his team now, the campaign team, is now merged with the RNC, and he's able to use their joint fundraising agreement, their election integrity department, their communications department that has really helped shape Joe Biden as one of the most unpopular presidents in history. And the fact that they are able to join forces and move forward and take on Joe Biden, that is going to be significant to him moving forward. And look, you can underestimate Donald Trump. If you do so, you don't understand Republican voters. They're not concerned with the January 6th, his legal woes, and the chaos and confusion. They're looking at policies like immigration, the economy, and national security that Donald Trump espouses, and they say will take our country in the right direction.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like Trump is trying to keep that base revved up. Biden making a play for those Haley voters, those folks in the middle.
Yeah.
I mean, David Challion is right. Perhaps it's not the right thing to call them Nikki Haley supporters now that we're moving into the general election campaign. Up until today. Now they're sort of up for grabs, independent, never Trump, folks that might vote for the Democrat, might vote for Joe Biden. I mean, Biden said this in his statement. Donald Trump made it clear he doesn't want Nikki Haley supporters. I want to be clear, there is a place for them in my campaign.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And clearly, I think that the Donald Trump campaign understood that those words that Donald Trump was saying in terms of saying, Nikki Haley supporters are not going to be welcome into the MAGA movement. We're going to purify the MAGA movement. No Romneys, right? And that kind of language, the campaign, Donald Trump's campaign, understands that that is not how you do addition. And I guarantee you, the person who wrote the statement this morning for Donald Trump, which is opposite of what he has been saying, was not him. And so I think moving forward, I think it's going to be hard for him to maintain that stance, because for him, it is all about just the MAGA movement. And interestingly, in Nikki Haley's statement, she kind of went after the MAGA movement. She talked about how dysfunctional Congress was. Well, Congress is is dysfunctional because of the MAGA movement. They haven't been able to do anything. She went after people who were not supporting money for Ukraine, money for Israel. Who is that? That's the MAGA movement. And so I think it's interesting. She also is trying to continue to have her lane, and the way that she did this was also out of a position of strength, of dignity, and not from a position of weakness, which is normally how somebody leaving a campaign does it.
Let me get Alice into this conversation. Judging from CNN's exit poll results that we were showing all of our viewers last night, and David did a great job on that, is it likely that Haley's supporters out there could eventually wind up voting for Biden?
Absolutely. And look, she has appealed to more moderate Republicans and certainly the independent voters. Look, I happened to pull my Haley flyer that I got in my door the other day. She specifically put a note on here, open primary. She was appealing to the independent voters and Democrats who might vote for Joe Biden. She appealed to them. So the fact that those are the voters that may have come out for her, they could potentially go to Biden. But I tell you what, fact check what Joe Biden just said, that Donald Trump is not appealing to try and win over Haley voters. He specifically said in his statement this morning, I welcome Haley voters to come to my campaign because right now our enemy is Joe Biden. So he can say that Biden's not welcoming them. That is simply not true.
He did that right after he trashed Nikki Haley. Right?
Well, exactly.
Yes.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
Right after he trounced her, he welcomed her voters onto the Trump train.
But he also did it after several times when he said anyone who supports Nikki Haley is not welcome in the MAGA movement. So again, he's lying, right? Surprise. But that's going to be, I think, part of the case for the Democrats and for Joe Biden moving forward.
But we should just make clear, guys, this is bigger than just Haley voters. Joe Biden, Donald Trump has a very enthusiastic base of support. Joe Biden is showing some diminution of support in his core constituencies, whether it is voters of color, especially young male voters of color, whether it is progressives over the Israel-Gaza issue. He has work to do with some core components of his base apart from the need to get some of these Nikki Haley voters. The Nikki Haley voters piece is a slice of this. But this is also going to be, with these two disliked candidates, a real contest of revving up each side's base.
And I think one of the most important crosstabs we're seeing out of polling lately was the New York Times CNN poll over the weekend, where they asked voters whose policies help you personally and whose policies hurt you personally. And the majority of those polled say that Donald Trump's policies help them personally more than Joe Biden's. And that fact right there and that appeal to voters on what affects them personally is going to be a big factor in helping Donald Trump to win more voters into his camp.
But just very quickly on the enthusiasm for Joe Biden, clearly the Democratic coalition has not come home yet. They will. But if you look at what happened last night in the primaries, Joe Biden was taking his supporters 80%, 90%. It was Donald Trump, the one that was losing and has been losing 20%, 30%, 40%.
Those are big numbers.
So exactly. Yeah. So that core for President Biden is there. He understands he's got to grow this. The Democratic coalition is in a position right now where they might tell a pollster out of frustration, yeah, I don't like Joe Biden. I am dissatisfied with what he has done, because they know that that answer right then and there is not consequential when it comes down to voting. And that's why you see special elections where Democrats have been overperforming. That's why you see President Biden completely trouncing in fundraising, record amount of money for a president going into a re-election campaign, $132 million cash on hand. That's going to be a really strong position.
And on the Democratic side, he really doesn't have any opposition right now. He's basically all by himself.
American Samoa was the only place.
I'll just say, Maria, you just laid out the bet that the Biden campaign is making. You said they will come home. That's his challenge over the next 8 months. We don't know that will happen yet, but that's the bet that they're placing.
That's right.
Maria, Alice, guys, thank you.
Thanks, Will.
Very, very much. Don't go too far away. Lots of news unfolding right now. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. All right, there are major new legal troubles for Senator Bob Menendez. Federal prosecutors have indicted the New Jersey Democrat on a dozen new criminal charges in the case accusing him and his wife of accepting bribes to benefit the governments of Egypt and Qatar. Most Senate Democrats have called for Menendez to resign. Menendez says he is innocent, rejects the calls to step down, and won't say if he will seek re-election this fall.
All right, let's discuss all this and more with former Nixon White House counsel John Dean. John, great to see you. I mean, Senator Menendez is already facing a mountain of legal issues. What is the significance of these charges? These new charges sound very serious.
Well, I think he's facing more charges because he appears to have the attitude he had as a result of winning last time when he was charged criminally. He was able to actually prevail in that case. The government, however, has obviously a lot of evidence. They hadn't rolled it all out in the first cases. They're rolling it out right now, and he's in a whole heap of trouble, Jim.
You know, it's interesting, John, this is Wolf Blitzer. Trump is the presumptive GOP nominee right now. It's a two-man race shaping up. He's facing a lot of criminal charges, 91 to be specific. What does this say about this moment right now, a historic moment in American politics?
Well, it says there's been a dramatic change in the Republican Party to make him the nominee with 91 felony counts against him in 4 different cases in 4 different jurisdictions. So it's quite shocking to me. I don't know any Republicans anymore that embrace Trump or can embrace the party. They've all become independents. I think, you know, a lot of people don't understand what's going on. I know that the type of personality that is attracted to Donald Trump isn't troubled by this. They're authoritarian personalities, and they think this is their strong man, and they want to have him prevail. So it tells us where we're going. I suspect we're in the general election mode right now. While Haley was mentioning his criminal problems, not very much. I think that's going to change, and I think that they're going to become much more front and center as the White House goes after him.
Yeah, I mean, John and Wolf, I mean, one of the things that we didn't talk about very much this morning is all of the legal hot water that Donald Trump is in and will stay in for the duration of this campaign, it looks like. And I do want to ask you about a new CNN exit poll last night that indicates the majority of Republican voters in 6 Super Tuesday states say Trump is fit for the presidency, even if he's convicted of a crime. John, what does that say about the state of your former party? I can't imagine when you were around during the Watergate days that you would have seen similar numbers in the case of Richard Nixon.
No, not at all. And Nixon had a very good political antenna. To the contrary, the party elders told him it was time to go. They didn't want him to go through with even an impeachment. And he, of course, was pardoned by Gerald Ford, and that cost Ford a chance to get elected on his own after becoming the appointed vice president. So times have changed dramatically. It is stunning. As I say, the fact that it's going to become much more of a campaign issue because the Republicans just weren't talking about it. They didn't want to talk about it. They don't want to talk about it. But we're going to have to talk about it because it's got to be resolved. It also, with Haley out, Trump is much more free now to get about the business of defending himself. He can't use that excuse that he's got to be campaigning. He's got the nomination for all practical purposes, so he's going to be focusing more on his criminal defense, and that will draw media attention, of course, to those criminal defenses, which are pretty threadbare, excuse me.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he's looking ahead to a general election against Biden in November, so that's going to be at the top of his mind as well. Before you go, John, I have to ask you a big question this morning. Will Haley supporters come home to the GOP in November?
Well, I think she'll give a signal one way or the other. Ultimately, I would be surprised, given what she did have to say as the campaign progressed, where she was pretty harsh on Trump and his problems and the chaos he clearly creates where he goes. I don't think they will come home. Those that I know personally, they were Haley supporters. They're not going to become Trump supporters. They're going to become more likely either third party or Biden voters.
Interesting.
So it's up for grabs right now.
Yeah, times have really changed. During Watergate, it was Republican leaders who went to Richard Nixon and said, it's time to go. In the year 2024, Republicans have made Donald Trump they're basically their presumptive nominee. We're not officially there yet, but very close. It's a two-man race. All right, John Dean, thank you very much. In the meantime, we are following some breaking news out of Ukraine. If you're just catching up on all of this, a stunning situation in Ukraine this morning. President Volodymyr Zelensky says a Russian missile hit near his convoy, killing several people. The details are ahead.
This is CNN Breaking News.
And we are following some more breaking news out of Ukraine. President Zelensky says a Russian missile hit near where he and the Greek Prime Minister were meeting in Odessa on the Black Sea. Zelensky says people were killed and injured in that attack. And CNN's Fred Pleiken joins me now. Fred, what more can you tell us?
Hi there, Jim. Well, it certainly looks like it might have been a close call there for the Ukrainian president and actually also the Greek prime minister. It's not clear whether or not the Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelensky, was actually the target of what apparently took place there, which seems to have been a missile strike by the Russians near the port or inside the port of Odessa. It was quite interesting to hear the Ukrainian president say that they not only heard an explosion, but he says that they also saw the missile as it was coming down, which of course seems to indicate that both him and the Prime Minister of Greece were quite close to that explosion that took place. I want to listen in to what Volodymyr Zelensky had to say later at a press conference. Let's listen in.
We saw this strike today. You can see who we are dealing with. They don't care where they strike. I know that there are victims today. I don't know all the details yet, but I know that there are dead and wounded. We need to defend ourselves first and foremost. The best way to do that is with an air defense system.
And Jim, the Ukrainian president there saying that there were dead and wounded. The Ukrainian authorities, the Ukrainian Navy now coming out and saying that there were 5 people who were killed and further people who were wounded in that strike. And some new information that we literally just got a couple of minutes ago actually coming from the Russians. They claim that near that port facility that they struck what they said was a warehouse containing unmanned sea drones from the Ukrainians. Again, impossible to confirm whether or not that was really the case, but definitely appears as though it could have been a close call there for the Ukrainian president, Jim.
Absolutely. I mean, that would have been extraordinary had things turned out differently here. Glad that the president is okay. Fred Pleiken, thank you very much. Joining me now to discuss, CNN national security analyst and former deputy director of national intelligence, Beth Sander, and CNN military analyst, retired Air Force Colonel Cedric Layton. Beth, let me start with you first. I mean, this, as Fred was saying just a few moments ago, this was an extremely close call. And according to the Ukrainians, this Russian strike not only potentially could have taken out the Russian president, but the Greek prime minister. I mean, can you imagine if something like that had occurred? Just extraordinary.
Yeah, it is absolutely extraordinary. And it's interesting what this might mean in terms of really galvanizing even more the European support for this war effort. You know, this attack, I mean, obviously the Russians knew he was there. They knew Zelensky was there, and they did it on purpose. And I don't want to steal Cedric's thunder here, but what Fred just said about attacking the warehouse with the unmanned sea drones, it does seem to me that this is in retaliation, perhaps, for the sinking of that Russian warship yesterday, the patrol ship that was only a year and a half old and has cruise missiles and is part of what is the force in the Black Sea that is continuing this raining down these missiles on Odessa and across Ukraine.
Yeah, Colonel Layton, what do you think? I mean, the other question that I had in the back of my mind as I was digesting this news this morning is whether or not the Russians have the ability to track Zelensky's movements with this kind of precision, because it sounds like this was fairly close.
Yeah, I think so, Jim. And, you know, we certainly have to think of the possibility that the Russians are tracking Zelensky's movements. This, you know, according to some reports at least, you know, as Beth indicated, was about 150 meters or so away from Zelensky's convoy. That's pretty darn close. And, you know, if they were also looking at going after the sea drones, as Beth mentioned, that, of course, is a military target and, you know, is, you know, clearly clearly within some of the parameters that the Russians have set for themselves and would be of military interest to them. But they also, of course, have always wanted to do something that would decapitate, in essence, the Ukrainian regime, and this would be one way in which they could do that. Of course, that they also had the Greek Prime Minister Mitsotakis visiting at the same time. That might have complicated things if something bad had happened. In addition to what already occurred. But this is clearly a Russian effort to go after the leadership. Very distinct possibility of that. And there's also the chance, of course, that they were going after a military target in this particular case.
And Beth, it's impossible to not put this in the political context this morning. I mean, this morning we had Nikki Haley dropping out of the presidential race, but at the same time saying that aid to Ukraine is essential, and that's what her supporters want to see happen. Obviously, Donald Trump feels differently about a lot of this. He has other plans for Ukraine and Russia. How big of an issue is this issue now of Congress passing aid for Ukraine with Donald Trump all but guaranteed to be the Republican nominee come November?
Yeah, I think that this is, it is getting to the point where we are on the verge here of Ukraine really potentially having the tables turned completely on them. And it is just unconscionable to me that the U.S. Congress is not doing what they're supposed to do. I mean, put it on the floor and debate it and vote on it, right? Isn't that what democracy is all about? Just vote on it. And let's see where the votes come down. But I mean, we're at the point now where Ukraine cannot defend itself. And they're almost out of air defense missiles in many cases. And certainly they are rationing their ammunition. And it's why they're losing territory. So I think I also just want to take a second and remind people that it's not $60 billion for Ukraine, that package. Only $14 billion of it is actually for Ukrainian arms. Another $20 billion is just going straight to U.S. manufacturers, along with that $14 billion. But that $20 billion is just going to go back into the U.S. stockpile. So, these votes also aren't just about Ukraine. It's also about America and about America's safety and about American jobs. And I think that is really what Republicans should focus on, as well as doing the right thing for Ukraine and for the U.S. reputation in the world, which Haley really doubled down on today.
Yeah. We have to go. I apologize, Colonel Layton. I do want to get your take on all of that. We'll do it next time. We'll have you back. We're going to talk about this Ukrainian issue tomorrow. Beth Sainer, Colonel Layton, thanks to both of you. A lot of breaking news this morning. Really appreciate both of you taking time for us. In the meantime, happening now in Georgia, the Maine attorney trying to remove the Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis from Donald Trump's election subversion trial is testifying at the state capitol right now. That effort continues. We'll explain why. That's next. You're live in the CNN Newsroom. The bid to remove Fulton County DA Fani Willis from the Georgia election subversion case shifts from the courtroom to the state capitol today. These are live pictures from Atlanta right now, where a key attorney leading those efforts is testifying before a state Senate committee investigating Willis. CNN's Nick Valencia is outside the Capitol for us. This committee, Nick, from what I understand, cannot sanction Fani Willis, but I suppose they can apply some pressure on the situation. Tell us more about what's happening today.
Jim, today has very much so the feeling of political theater. We had anticipated that Ashley Merchant was going to face a friendly line of questioning, but that's even exceeded our expectations so far. This is a bipartisan Senate committee here for in the Georgia State Capitol, but it is made up of primarily Republicans, and so far only the Republican chairman has been allowed to question Merchant, and it's allowed her to reiterate her argument as to why Fani Willis should be disqualified from this case without being challenged. The questions were intended to focus on whether or not Willis had a conflict of interest or misused public funds, but they also have delved into political propaganda with a suggestion that Willis was colluding with the Biden White House when she visited the White House in 2023. Of course, we know from our reporting that those were routine visits from the DA's office with the White House. But it really underscores just how much he's able to say things without being pushed back on. This committee has no power or authority whatsoever to remove Fani Willis, but they can continue to make her life very difficult and use their subpoena power. Ashley Merchant, the first witness here in what is expected to be a very long process for this committee investigating Fani Willis. Jim.
All right, Nick Valencia, thank you very much for that update. Coming up, Alabama lawmakers set to pass a measure to protect IVF clinics and patients after the state's Supreme Court's controversial ruling on that matter. That's next. Later today, lawmakers in Alabama are set to pass a bill that would protect IVF providers and patients from prosecution if embryos are damaged or destroyed. The effort comes nearly 3 weeks after the state Supreme Court ruled that embryos are children. CNN's Isabel Rosales is in Montgomery for us. Isabel, a very big deal, a big issue down in Alabama. What could we see? Do we expect a vote today?
Hey, Jim. Yes, the Senate convenes at 4 p.m. Eastern. The House convenes at 5 p.m. Eastern. We're expecting all of this to move through quickly and then to land at the governor's desk, where she has said she is ready to sign into law any sort of protection for patients, for clinics, and medical providers who provide IVF treatments. Now, I spoke with Dr. Mamie McClain of Alabama Fertility, one of the 3 clinics that paused IVF treatments in the wake of the state Supreme Court ruling. And she tells me that her clinic is ready to roll out IVF treatments, restart those as early as tomorrow, should this be signed into law. She tells me that in the 13 days since her clinics paused these treatments, there have been at least 35 frozen embryo transfers that were canceled. Meanwhile, the University of Alabama at Birmingham, another such clinic that paused IVF treatment, said that it will continue to follow the ruling of the state Supreme Court unless it reconsiders, which is something that typically isn't done, or unless a bill is signed into law. Again, the ruling did not dictate that clinics shut down or pause IVF treatments, but clinics like UAB have said that they worried about legal repercussions now that frozen embryos are seen as children. UAB did not give me any sort of indication as to the timing of how immediately IVF treatments will come back. Jim.
All right, Isabel Rosales, thank you very much. We'll be following that all day long, and thank you very much for joining me in the CNN Newsroom. I'm Jim Acosta. I'll be back tomorrow at 10 a.m. Stay with CNN Inside Politics with Dana Bash. Starts after a short break. Have a great day, everybody.